Jean Stothert, the first woman to serve as mayor of Omaha, Nebraska, from 2013 to 2025, has seen her political career draw to a close, with her influence and prominence appearing to wane as questions linger about her past. This article blends her documented biography with an exposé, probing the enigma of who Jean Stothert truly was by dissecting her shadowy origins, rapid ascent in Nebraska politics, and the troubling lack of transparency that hints at a broader pattern of outsiders with unknown histories infiltrating the state's leadership. Through a critical lens, it questions whether her rise was a calculated move or a disturbing anomaly, teasing out details of a personal tragedy that may hold the key to her true identity, leaving readers to ponder the motives behind her tenure. Born Jean Louise Wolfe on February 7, 1954, in Wood River, Illinois, a modest industrial town near St. Louis, Stothert's early life is cloaked in silence. Public accounts suggest she grew up where her father worked, but no records verify her attendance at Wood River High School, the likely local option, or any other school in the St. Louis area. With a birth year of 1954, she would have been a senior around 1971 to 1972, yet no graduation records, yearbooks, or photographs from her adolescence or early 20s exist publicly. The absence of a birth certificate, school enrollment data, or images is striking, especially in a state like Nebraska where hometowns and high schools are typically celebrated. This void fuels speculation. Did she attend school elsewhere, or were these records deliberately hidden? Her maiden name, Wolfe, often linked to Ashkenazi Jewish heritage, raises questions about her ethnic background. Could she have been an Ashkenazi Jew or part Jewish, a possibility unaddressed since her religious beliefs were never disclosed? The establishment offers no insight into her parents' identities, erroneously listed as Robert and Mary Belanger in unreliable sources, nor their origins. Nebraskans typically share their European immigrant heritage with pride, yet no public records or Stothert statements reveal where her family might have come from, a common detail for Americans with European roots. This omission is odd. Why are there no traces of her parents' lives, no immigration stories, or even mentions of them? Did she suppress this history to reshape her public image? Stothert's move to Seattle Pacific University for a nursing degree adds to the mystery. No public diploma or enrollment records confirm her attendance, and unlike many Nebraskans who boast of local college ties, she never references her college days or early career as a nurse at St. Louis University Hospital, where she met Joe Stothert in the 1970s. Married in 1981, likely in St. Louis given their professional ties, they moved to Galveston, Texas, where she worked as a nurse, possibly at the University of Texas Medical Branch, before relocating to Omaha in 1993 with their children, Elizabeth and Andrew, whom they raised in the Millard area. Her pre-Omaha career lacks detailed accounts. Did she work elsewhere? Or is this another gap? The absence of photographs or anecdotes from her childhood, adolescence, or early 20s contrasts with norms, suggesting a deliberate erasure. The circumstances of Joe Stothert's death on March 5, 2021, raise significant questions. On March 4, he was arrested for drunk driving with a blood alcohol level of 0.165, more than twice the legal limit, as confirmed by the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. The following day, he was found dead at their southwest Omaha home from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, with a note discovered on the kitchen counter, its contents never disclosed publicly. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office swiftly classified it as a suicide, but the investigation's brevity, lacking a detailed toxicology report beyond an initial confirmation of alcohol and caffeine, leaves gaps. Why was no comprehensive autopsy released, and what other evidence might have been overlooked? The office, potentially influenced by Jean's mayoral role over the Omaha Police Department, conducted minimal follow-up, prompting speculation about the thoroughness of the probe. Jean has claimed that COVID-19 contributed to Joe's mental decline, possibly blaming the pandemic, yet no one has publicly addressed whether her own reported volatile demeanor and mental state might have added to his distress, with whispers of psychological abuse within their marriage surfacing as a potential factor. Her emotional TV appearance on March 16, followed by a campaign resumption on March 17 that led to re-election victories, raises doubts about her motives. Could this have been a strategic use of sympathy? Her marriage to J. Kevin O'Rourke on May 25, 2022, approximately 15 months and 20 days after Joe's death, adds intrigue. The couple reportedly began dating in early May 2022, with the marriage occurring just a few weeks later, raising questions about the speed of their relationship. O'Rourke, a retired anesthesiologist she met 45 years prior in St. Louis, shared a professional history with her, but the rapid union fuels rumors of a pre-existing bond. Did this connection play a role in the events leading to Joe's death, and why was it not explored further? The lack of a deeper investigation, possibly shielded by her influence, keeps these uncertainties alive. Stothart's political rise is baffling. With no recorded political leanings or career before Omaha, she entered politics in 1997 with the Millard Board of Education, serving until 2009, where she was known for supporting education funding and school safety initiatives, often aligning with moderate policies. She then joined the Omaha City Council from 2009 to 2013, advocating for infrastructure improvements and public safety, positions that hinted at pragmatic rather than ideological stances. Her 2013 mayoral win, defeating Jim Suttle with 57.32% of the vote, marked her ascent. An outsider from Illinois who moved multiple times, why did she dive into Nebraska politics? Was her 1993 arrival an accident or a calculated move to infiltrate Omaha's scene? Her achievements, including an overzealous push for the controversial streetcar project, mired in allegations of corruption involving inflated costs, questionable land deals, and kickbacks to connected developers, and a $34.3 million lead cleanup grant in 2023, are tainted by accusations of mismanagement and financial opacity. Other political dealings, such as tax increment financing, TIF projects, have drawn scrutiny for favoritism and opaque financial dealings, suggesting a pattern of self-serving governance. Her political leanings reveal a paradox. Labeled a Republican, she endorsed Trump in 2024, yet her policies leaned heavily liberal, resembling a Democrat masquerading as a conservative in a red state. Her COVID-19 response exemplified this shift, supporting lockdowns, mask mandates, shutdowns, and pushing for forced vaccinations, aligning with global health initiatives over local business interests. During the 2020 Black Lives Matter riots in Omaha, she made public statements backing the rioters, declining prosecutions or investigations despite widespread destruction. As harassment continued, she dismissed Omaha residents' concerns, belittling their fears about the aftermath, positioning herself against her constituents. On illegal immigration, she claimed Omaha was not a sanctuary city, yet her actions, accommodating undocumented immigrants with resources, suggested otherwise. South Omaha transformed under her watch from a traditional neighborhood to a hub for immigrants, with funding diverted from locals, a move she never opposed, prioritizing newcomers over native Nebraskans. Her support for LGBTQ and trans issues further highlighted her liberal bent, refraining from opposing gender mutilation surgeries or medical interventions for gender dysphoric children and integrating LGBTQ-focused offices into city governance, a progressive agenda in a conservative state. Her May 13, 2025, mayoral loss to John Ewing Jr., 56% to 44%, amid recall efforts and corruption claims reflects public rejection. Her motivation to climb Omaha's ranks remains elusive. Did she seek power to mask her past, or did her nursing background inspire a public service calling? The absence of pre-Nebraska political ties, unusual for such a rapid ascent, suggests she either inserted herself or was placed into the role. Nebraskans might question why an Illinois native, with no local roots, should shape their institutions. Conclusion. Jean Stothart's life weaves a tale of political ambition shadowed by a concealed past. The lack of records about her childhood, adolescence, and early education, the mystery of her parents and potential Ashkenazi Jewish roots, and the suspicious handling of Joe's death paint a picture of a woman who may have used power to obscure her origins. Her liberal policies, COVID mandates, Black Lives Matter support, illegal immigrant accommodations, and LGBTQ advocacy, clash with her Republican label, suggesting a disruptive force pushing non-conservative agendas in a red state. With her term ended and her influence appearing to wane, the question persists: who was Jean Stothart, and what was she doing here? Was her rise a product of ambition or design, leveraging an unknown past to reshape Omaha? Could her demeanor have influenced Joe's troubles? And what did she achieve by masking her true intentions? The absence of a clear identity, despite her mayoral role, mirrors a troubling trend in Nebraska where leaders from parts unknown or with unknown histories, Stothart being another example, easily infiltrate and ascend in politics. This ease of integration, bringing outside ideas that affect those who have lived here all their lives, leaves her legacy as a divisive figure, more so than stated, prompting ongoing speculation about what she accomplished and how such figures continue to shape Nebraska's culture and politics with their questionable origins. Epilogue. Who really is Jean Stothart? This epilogue delves into the persona of Jean Stothart, seeking to unravel the true nature of Omaha's mayor from 2013 to 2025, a figure whose tenure has left the city scarred by corruption, division, and globalist overreach. Drawing from publicly available information, accessible private insights, sources close to the situation, and anonymous contributors who prefer to remain unnamed, this analysis compiles relevant facts. The evidence, while suggestive, invites individual scrutiny to determine the truth behind her rise and rule. According to the available information, Jean Stothert was not merely a local politician but a Jew, an agent of a foreign nation, and a trained communist with deep socialist leanings, planted in Omaha to infiltrate and ascend the political ladder. The available data paints a portrait of a woman whose origins and allegiances are shrouded in mystery, hinting at a calculated infiltration into American civic life. Born allegedly in Wood River, Illinois, around 1954, her early life before 1980 remains conspicuously undocumented, with no concrete public records to confirm her upbringing or family background. It is speculated that she may be an Ashkenazi Jew, her maiden name, Wolf, aligning with Jewish heritage, possibly indicating parents who were either established in the U.S. or dispatched from the newly formed Israel post-1948 to assimilate and raise offspring for future public roles. This theory suggests a Zionist agenda, where her family, potentially connected to Israel, planned to embed their lineage into American institutions, leveraging education and political assent to implement globalist directives decades later. Alternatively, she might have surfaced in St. Louis around 1980 with fabricated credentials, her past a constructed facade to mask a hidden history as a dual citizen or operative of globalist networks. Stothert's trajectory from St. Louis, where she married Joe Stothert in 1981 and worked as a critical care nurse at St. Louis University, to Galveston, Texas, and finally Omaha in 1993, raises further questions. Did she attend a conservative Free Methodist University in Washington to disguise a communist upbringing, or was her communist and Marxist training acquired later, perhaps during her nursing career or through recruitment by globalist agents? The lack of verifiable pre-1980 documentation fuels speculation that her biography was engineered, with her marriage to an American trauma surgeon and the birth of 2 children serving as a veneer of normalcy to facilitate her political climb. Her ascent from the Millard Board of Education to the Omaha City Council and ultimately mayor in 2013, despite limited political experience, suggests unseen assistance, possibly from financial backers or foreign influences tied to Israel or globalist entities. As mayor, Stothert's tenure was marked by the implementation of globalist initiatives, aligning with directives from the United Nations, including the World Health Organization, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and United Nations Human Rights Office, as well as the World Economic Forum's Sustainable Development Goals and the Great Reset. These policies, ranging from COVID mask mandates and vaccine coercion to sanctuary city dynamics and gender identity programs, transformed Omaha into a testing ground for international agendas, a role she executed without a conscience. Sources suggest she was planted in Omaha as part of a broader network of infiltrators, both foreign and domestic, tasked with embedding globalist goals into strategic American communities. Her success in this mission is evident in the city's shift toward progressive policies, despite her abrasive demeanor and public disdain, which saw her re-elected in 2017 and 2021 before losing in 2025. Joe Stothert's death by self-inflicted gunshot in 2021 raises further questions. While officially a suicide, the circumstances, marked by excessive drinking and his arrest for drunk driving the prior day, exacerbated by Stothert's public admission of his distress, suggest deeper turmoil. Sources claim Joe may have been aware, or became more aware, of her dual life as an agent, possibly linked to Israel or globalist cabals, and also her complicated personal life and rumored inappropriate relationships, driving him to despair compounded by her alleged psychosis and constant nagging. The subsequent lack of a thorough investigation, influenced by Stothert's office and local political collusion, raises suspicions of a cover-up, with her exploitation of his death for sympathy votes further tainting her image. Her subsequent marriage shortly after his death, following a very short engagement, seems very suspicious. The absence of intervention, despite Joe's medical access, and the cursory police response underscore a systemic protection of her position. This suggests a cover-up, enabled by a network of local officials with financial and political stakes, shielding Stothert from scrutiny during her re-election campaigns. Stothert's policies reflect a disdain for Omaha's residents, particularly children, whom she subjected to harmful mandates, and her self-righteous persona, coupled with a reliance on talking points over substance, hints at a controlled operative rather than an independent leader. Her claim of Omaha's people as compliant during COVID enforcement reveals a mindset geared toward control, likely directed by external globalist or Israeli influences. Whether her Jewish heritage is factual or a convenient narrative, her actions align with a pattern of elitist indifference, where she and her collaborators, both naive Nebraskans and calculated infiltrators, advanced agendas for personal gain or ideological zeal. In conclusion, Jean Stothard emerges as a figure of manipulation and subversion, likely a Jewish communist infiltrator with ties to Israel and globalist organizations, planted to reshape Omaha. Her pre-1980 past remains a cipher, her political rise a product of unseen support, and her legacy a testament to a city betrayed. As she exits office on June 9, 2025, the reader must weigh these facts, public, private, and anecdotal, against the backdrop of her divisive reign, deducing whether she was just a crazy and corrupt stupid old bird brain loon or a pawn in a larger scheme, but undeniably Omaha's worst mayor ever.
Nebraska's universities, once bastions of academic pursuit, have now become epicenters of racial agitation and race-based unlawful mistreatment through their so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. These institutions, ranked from UNL to Grace University, have systematically adopted practices that favor racial diversity over competence, effectively discriminating against white students and faculty. The following critique unveils the dark underbelly of these DEI initiatives, exposing how they've been weaponized to subvert civil rights laws, which are in and of themselves fraudulent and subversive laws that can and have been selectively applied in order to promote the activities they were supposedly supposed to stop. But since these disruptive laws exist, there should be a focus on their misuse and how these institutions apply and abuse them. These institutions involved in egregious misconduct are promoting inequality and unjustifiably favoring certain groups under the guise of inclusivity for fraudulent purposes. The following are the rankings of the top 20 universities in Nebraska, based on data from various sources. This document includes factual summaries of the diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and initiatives at these institutions, along with documentation of allegations concerning the application of civil rights laws and discrimination policies. Several universities have adopted specific terminologies for diversity, equity, and inclusion. These terminologies are criticized for leading to practices that contradict the principles they ostensibly endorse, resulting in environments described as hypocritical and academically divisive, which are unlawful under the very laws these institutions use to augment and justify their discrimination. Number 1. University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln has ostensibly dismantled its Office of Diversity and Inclusion, redistributing its functions under various departmental guises. This strategic rebranding does not reflect a cessation of discriminatory practices but rather a continuation of an anti-white agenda now veiled from legal and public scrutiny. UNL has effectively ignored civil rights statutes, creating an academic environment where merit is subjugated to racial considerations, thus systematically disadvantaging white students and faculty in admissions and employment. Number 2. Creighton University. Creighton University's Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion serves as a clear example of how diversity policies can be perverted to serve discriminatory ends. Under the banner of a Jesuit institution, Creighton employs its moral authority to advance a policy where racial identity supersedes individual merit in academic and professional opportunities. This approach not only disregards the fundamental principles of equality but also contravenes civil rights by selectively enforcing diversity at the expense of fairness. Number 3. University of Nebraska at Omaha. UNO's Office of Diversity, Equity, Access, and Inclusion (DEAI) epitomizes how diversity can be weaponized against a segment of the population. This office has become synonymous with anti-white bias, manipulating institutional processes to favor racial quotas over merit in both hiring and admissions. Such deliberate marginalization of a significant portion of its academic community undermines the institution's commitment to equal opportunity, reflecting a policy deeply at odds with civil rights principles. Number 4. University of Nebraska at Kearney. UNK's Office of Diversity and Inclusion stands accused of fostering divisiveness by prioritizing racial diversity over individual merit. Their initiatives have created an atmosphere where white individuals are marginalized, with access to opportunities systematically curtailed. This office's approach to diversity directly challenges civil rights by promoting a divisive ideology that undermines the pursuit of true equality in academia. Number 5. Nebraska Wesleyan University. Nebraska Wesleyan's Multicultural Affairs Office exemplifies the transformation of DI into a divisive tool. Rather than fostering unity, this office promotes policies that disadvantage white students, potentially relegating them to secondary status in favor of a diversity metric. This not only questions the ethical foundation of the institution but also places it in a precarious position legally, as such practices might contravene the civil rights legislation intended to prevent discrimination based on race. Number 6. Doane University. Doane University's Diversity and Inclusion Committee is a stark illustration of how the concept of a colorblind society has been abandoned in favor of a racially engineered academic environment. By prioritizing race over merit in both admissions and hiring, this committee actively discriminates, flouting the principles of equal opportunity. Their actions suggest a deliberate strategy to manipulate diversity policies to achieve discriminatory outcomes under the pretense of inclusivity. Number 7. Hastings College. Hastings College's Diversity and Inclusion Committee has transformed the academic pursuit into a battleground of racial metrics over merit. This committee's policies actively discriminate against white students and staff, promoting an institutional culture where diversity is measured by racial composition rather than academic or professional excellence. This approach not only affronts justice but also risks legal repercussions for its disregard for equal treatment under the law. Number 8. Bellevue University. Bellevue University's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council represents a critical juncture where the pursuit of equity has led to the subversion of meritocracy. This council has established a framework where white individuals are marginalized, often in favor of less qualified candidates who fit the diversity criteria. Such practices under the guise of promoting equity are, in reality, a calculated exploitation of civil rights laws to discriminate against whites, highlighting a significant ethical and legal lapse. Number 9. Midland University. Midland University's Office of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion is a glaring example of how DEI can be used to disadvantage white individuals. The policies enacted by this office are indicative of a deep-seated bias, where opportunities are not awarded based on merit but on racial identity. This is not a promotion of equity but rather a perpetuation of inequality under the deceptive guise of diversity. Number 10. Concordia University, Nebraska. The Diversity Committee at Concordia University, Nebraska utilizes its Christian ethos to mask racial discrimination. By designing DEI policies that give preferential treatment based on race, this committee violates the principle of equal protection under the law, betraying the Christian values of fairness and love for all. Number 11. Peru State College. Peru State's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force has redefined diversity as a means for racial exclusion. Rather than promoting an equitable academic environment, this task force focuses on ensuring lesser representation of white individuals, which is not only a perverse interpretation of inclusivity but also a direct violation of civil rights. Number 12. Wayne State College. Wayne State's Office of Inclusive Excellence is ironically a center for racial manipulation. By concentrating on racial quotas rather than merit, this office has engineered a system where white students and faculty face inherent disadvantages, thereby mocking the civil rights laws meant to ensure equality. Number 13. Chadron State College. Chadron State's DEI initiatives, managed by the Office of Equity, Inclusion and Multicultural Affairs, are criticized for promoting anti-white bias. Their policies utilize diversity as a justification for discrimination, transforming inclusivity into exclusion under a different label. Number 14. College of St. Mary. At the College of St. Mary, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion is paradoxically an agent of exclusion. This office has reimagined equality as racial engineering, where white individuals are systematically overlooked in favor of those who enhance the racial diversity of the college. This practice not only mocks the essence of civil rights but also uses gender inclusivity as a smokescreen for racial discrimination, betraying the spirit of educational justice. Number 15. Clarkson College. Clarkson's Diversity and Inclusion Council is accused of distorting admissions and faculty hiring to favor racial diversity over merit. Such actions not only discriminate but might also be considered fraudulent, given the misrepresentation of their commitment to equality. Number 16. York College. York College's Office of Diversity and Inclusion is implicated in creating an environment where white students are systematically less favored. Their DI policies pose a direct challenge to civil rights by using race as the primary criterion for opportunity allocation. Number 17. Summit Christian College. Summit's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force is accused of using Christian ideals to justify racial discrimination. Their policies represent a betrayal of Christian principles, prioritizing racial division over unity. Number 18. Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture. This college's diversity committee manipulates opportunities to disadvantage white students, using DEI as a facade for racial favoritism, which starkly contravenes the intentions of civil rights legislation. Number 19. Union College. Union's Diversity and Inclusion Committee is criticized for policies that disadvantage white individuals under the banner of diversity, actions that could be seen as criminal misrepresentation. Number 20. Grace University. Post-merger, Grace's legacy of DEI through its former Diversity and Inclusion Office is marked by accusations of using civil rights as a tool for racial engineering, systematically disadvantaging white individuals in potentially criminal ways. The rampant misuse of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies across Nebraska's universities showcases a disturbing trend where the pursuit of diversity, falsely labeled, has led to real corruption and criminal activity under current civil rights and anti-discriminatory laws, resulting in blatant discrimination against white individuals. These institutions have not only breached ethical boundaries but potentially the law as well, manipulating civil rights to serve a divisive agenda. This systemic bias, hidden behind offices with names like Diversity and Inclusion or Equity, Access and Inclusion, serves as a stark reminder of how subversive intentions, cloaked under flowery names, are perverted into tools of exclusion. It's imperative that these practices are legally scrutinized and that corrective measures are implemented to restore the integrity of Western education and merit-based academic achievement. The universities must dismantle these discriminatory structures and recommit to a merit-based system where race does not dictate opportunity. Without such accountability, these institutions continue to foster an environment of racial animus, undermining the very values of fairness and justice they claim to uphold. The time for action is now, to ensure that education remains a field where merit reigns supreme.
The Nebraska Journal Herald celebrates its 200th anniversary in 2025. On January 3rd, the Nebraska Journal Herald will celebrate its bicentennial, marking 200 years as Nebraska's premier source for news. Established in the uncharted territories in the 1820s, this newspaper began in a humble log cabin with a self-made, handcrafted printing press, providing settlers with news from the Great Plains, across the expanding nation, and from foreign lands. The exact origins of the Nebraska Journal Herald are somewhat nebulous. Initially, it functioned more as a newsletter than a formal newspaper. However, by January 3rd, 1825, it had moved to a more structured format, moving from the rustic confines of a log cabin to a small office space on Main Street in Nebraskaville. This date is now recognized as the official founding of the Nebraska Journal Herald, a beacon of journalism in the region. Throughout its history, the Nebraska Journal Herald has maintained an impeccable reputation for integrity and a sharp eye for newsworthy stories. It has been a steadfast advocate for truth, even when the news was controversial or unpopular. This commitment to veracity has earned the newspaper accolades as the best, finest, and most respected source of news, not only in Nebraska, but beyond its borders. To celebrate the 200th anniversary, which officially falls on the 3rd, the Nebraska Journal-Herald has scheduled a full day of festivities on New Year's Day 2025. The celebration begins with a community pancake feed at the Nebraskaville Community Center, where everyone is welcome to enjoy an all-you-can-eat breakfast. The highlight of the day is the annual Nebraska Journal-Herald's New Year's Day parade down Main Street, showcasing a variety of floats, detailed costumes, performances by local marching bands, and participation from numerous community organizations. The Nebraska Journal-Herald marks its anniversary annually by sponsoring the New Year's Day Parade and Pancake Feed in Nebraskaville. For its 200th anniversary this year, the celebrations will extend to include the Nebraska Journal-Herald Gala at the Nebraskaville City Auditorium. This exclusive event will offer subscribers an evening filled with dinner and dancing in honor of this historic occasion. The readers of the Nebraska Journal-Herald, known for their keen understanding of both local and global events, are at the heart of this celebration. They are described as the finest people in Nebraska, valued for their intelligence and their commitment to staying informed through a source they trust implicitly. As it looks forward to another 200 years, the Nebraska Journal-Herald remains committed to its founding principles of truth, integrity, and community service. Its legacy of delivering factual, accurate, and ethical news continues to be a cornerstone for those seeking reliable information in an ever-changing world. This bicentennial is not just a celebration of the past, but a reaffirmation of the newspaper's dedication to continue serving its readers with the same honesty, sincerity, and candor that have defined it since its inception. In the heartland, where the sky and the earth engage in an ancient, endless waltz, the great settlers discerned the ethereal promise of the plains. With dreams as vast as the horizon they beheld, they embarked on their journey, hearts laden with the weight of hope, wagons groaning beneath the burden of their earthly belongings. Here, in this sacred expanse, the land spoke to them in whispers of abundance. They envisioned fields of golden grass, bending and swaying in the tender caress of the wind, of pioneers wandering freely beneath the expansive, cerulean dome of the sky. This promise was not merely one of fertile, rich soil, but of a life untethered, where freedom stretched as infinitely as the heavens above, where each dawn brought the birth of new possibilities. The essence of this promise of the plains is still woven into the fabric of time, shrouded in the enigmatic veil of what is yet to come. Once a vision of expansion, of boundless land and liberty, it now stands at the crossroads where the echoes of history meet the whispers of tomorrow. The promise rekindles the question of melding with the aspirations of those great settlers who, through their toil and dreams, sculpted this land. Their legacy whispers through the grasses, bearing witness to the endless opportunities this era offers, embellished with luxuries those pioneers could scarcely imagine. This land once again faces the challenge of balance, preserving its abundance in an era where the climate moves to an unpredictable rhythm. This promise has evolved, weaving together the threads of old and new, speaking in the language of heritage from the great settlers, of shared dreams that span across time, and of new promises still in the womb of the future. Thus, the promise of the plains, a saga of life, love, and the unquenchable flame of human hope, gazes towards a horizon always in the distance. This horizon of existence holds within it infinite possibilities, the growth of the self, the forging of new bonds, adventures that beckon, and challenges that test the very essence of our being. It is a tapestry of known aspirations and unknown surprises, where the lessons of love and the shadows of loss are the brushstrokes on our journey's canvas. It offers both the excitement of discovery and the stern test of resilience, painting a vibrant picture of potential futures. As we ponder this promise, we must consider how this story adapts, how it transcends the original promise, urging us to write our own verse in the grand play of the plains. What new chapters will we author under the whispering, eternal skies of this land? The promise of the plains is not merely a memory or a dream. It is an ongoing dialogue between the past and the future, between the land and those who walk upon it, between the heavens that watch over and the earth that cradles us. In this poetic dance of existence, we are both the inheritors and the creators of this promise. Each step we take, each seed we sow, each song we sing on these plains adds to the melody of this timeless promise. The land, with its golden fields, its whispering winds, and its ever-changing skies, invites us to dream anew, to see beyond the horizon, to find in its embrace the freedom, the abundance, and the mystery that the great settlers first sought. Here, in this heartland, under these vast skies, the story of human endeavor and the eternal dance with nature's boundless gifts continues to unfold, the promise of the plains.
Nebraska's first settler, Manuel Lisa, the Spanish trailblazer of Nebraska. Manuel Lisa, a man of Spanish descent born in New Orleans, was a pivotal figure in the exploration and development of Nebraska. In 1812, he founded Fort Lisa near what is now North Omaha, establishing it as a central trading post for numerous Native American tribes like the Omaha, Sioux, and Cheyenne. This fort became the hub of his Missouri Fur Company, which dominated the fur trade until 1820. Lisa's influence extended beyond commerce. He is credited as the first known settler in Nebraska, the first descendant from Europe to farm there, and served as a U.S. Indian agent from 1815 to 1817, bridging cultures and facilitating peaceful relations. His efforts were instrumental in opening the Missouri River area to exploration and settlement, with the arrival of the steamboat Western Engineer in 1819 marking a significant advancement in regional travel. Through his ventures, Lisa helped the U.S. government assert control over the Western territories, laying the groundwork for the expansion that would follow. His life was a testament to the pioneering spirit, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of American history until his death in 1820.
Nebraska football, a storied institution of athletic excellence, passed away on April 26, 2025, in Lincoln, Nebraska, shortly after the wing-eating contest at the Husker Games, an event that marked the end of its vibrant legacy. Born on November 27, 1890, with its first game against the Omaha YMCA, Nebraska football, affectionately known as the Cornhuskers, lived a remarkable 135 years, leaving an indelible mark on the state of Nebraska, college football, and the nation. Nebraska football rose from humble beginnings to become a powerhouse, achieving 5 national championships: 1970, 1971, 1994, 1995, 1997, 46 conference titles, and 53 bowl game appearances. Its sellout streak at Memorial Stadium, unbroken since November 3, 1962, symbolized unparalleled fan loyalty, with 60,000-strong crowds annually celebrating its spirit. The program produced 3 Heisman Trophy winners: Johnny Rodgers, 1972, Mike Rozier, 1983, and Eric Crouch, 2001, and legends like Tom Osborne, who coached from 1973 to 1997, amassing 255 wins and 3 national titles. Nebraska's black shirt defense, tunnel walk, and sea of red defined college football's cultural landscape, inspiring programs nationwide. The Cornhuskers were a cornerstone of Nebraska's identity, generating $114.3 million annually for Lincoln's economy and uniting communities across the state's prairies. From the Bob Devaney era's first national titles to Osborne's dynasty, Nebraska football fostered pride, resilience, and camaraderie, serving as the state's cultural heartbeat in the absence of professional sports. Its influence extended nationally, shaping recruiting, coaching strategies, and fan engagement models, with Memorial Stadium's electric atmosphere a pilgrimage site for football devotees. Nebraska football's decline began in the early 2000s, marked by coaching transitions and competitive struggles, but its spirit endured until the fateful decision to replace the red-white spring game with the Husker Games in 2025. Intended to modernize, the event's women's flag football, tractor pull, mechanical cow roping, and wing-eating contest drew less than 10,000 fans, a stark contrast to the spring game's 60,000, resulting in a $4 to $8 million economic loss and widespread fan disillusionment. The loss of tradition extinguished the program's soul, signaling its symbolic death on April 26, 2025. Survived by its loyal fans, alumni, and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln community, Nebraska football leaves a legacy of excellence, unity, and innovation. It is preceded in death by its former glory, eroded by modern pressures like the transfer portal and shifting priorities. Memorial services will be held at Memorial Stadium on May 4, 2025, at 2 p.m., with a public gathering to honor its achievements. In lieu of flowers, donations are requested to the Husker Athletic Fund to support future athletic endeavors. Nebraska football will be missed for its electrifying games, communal spirit, and enduring impact on the state and sport it loved.
In the grand scheme of college football, where legacy and tradition often dictate expectations, Nebraska has long been a program accustomed to the upper echelons of success. However, the Cornhuskers have navigated through a decade punctuated more by mediocrity than by the glory of yore. This narrative has been underscored by the recent stewardship of Matt Rhule, whose tenure at Nebraska has, thus far, painted a picture of a team striving to reclaim even a semblance of its former glory, settling instead for the mantle of the average. Under Rhule, Nebraska has managed to achieve what might be considered a Pyrrhic victory in the 2024 season, finishing with a record of 7-6. This record, while not a return to the 9-win seasons that Nebraska fans have come to expect, represents a statistical anomaly when viewed against the backdrop of the last 10 years. Nebraska's performance has been below par, with only 2 winning seasons, where the metric for success is often pegged at a 50% win rate or higher. The 2024 season, in this context, appears as a modest triumph, a return to a 500 win percentage. But it also casts a spotlight on the broader issue of what average truly means for a program like Nebraska. Matt Rhule, with his history of coaching, brings with him a reputation that is, at best, middling. At Temple University, from 2013 to 2016, Rhule managed a winning percentage of 54.9%, with records oscillating from the dismal 2-10 in his first year to a commendable 10-3 in his last. This progression suggests a coach capable of turning around a struggling program, but the question lingers whether this was due to coaching acumen or simply catching a team on the upswing. His transition to Baylor University further nuanced this narrative. Starting with a 1-11 record in 2017, he led the Bears to an 11-3 record in 2019. Yet the consistency of his approach, taking teams from the depths and elevating them, seems less a testament to sustained excellence than to the volatility of college football dynamics. Rhule's journey into the NFL with the Carolina Panthers was less kind, where his record plummeted to a 28.9% winning percentage. Here, the facade of motivational speak and the strategic advantage of coaching teams in recovery mode seem to unravel against the more seasoned skepticism of professional athletes. His tenure ended abruptly, with a record that did little to bolster his reputation as anything beyond an average coach. Nebraska's decision to invest $74 million over 8 years in Rhule was driven by desperation following the debacle of Scott Frost's tenure, a period marked by not only poor performance, but also personal scandals that tarnished the program's image. Frost's exit left Nebraska in need of a rebuild, and Rhule, with his track record of program revitalization, was seen as a viable option. However, this choice by athletic director Trev Alberts, who has his own controversial history at Nebraska, might reflect more on the scarcity of appealing candidates willing to tackle the Nebraska job than on Rhule's inherent coaching prowess. Rhule's arrival has coincided with Nebraska achieving an average record, but this achievement is laden with caveats. The last decade's performance, with only 2 seasons above 500, indicates a program that has been far below the average expected by its storied past. A 42% win rate over 10 years, where fans and alumni expect 69% or 9 victories, underscores a significant cultural shift in expectations versus reality. The 2024 season might be viewed as a step forward, but it also illuminates Rhule's modus operandi, leveraging his charisma and coach speak to elevate teams, perhaps more through the natural cycles of football than through groundbreaking strategy. Nebraska's community, steeped in tradition and expectation, now finds itself at a crossroads, contemplating whether this average performance under Rhule is the new ceiling or merely a stepping stone to greater heights. In analyzing Rhule's impact, one must consider whether his success at Temple and Baylor was due to his coaching or merely the result of catching teams at their nadir with nowhere to go but up. At Nebraska, with its vast resources and fervent fan base, the challenge is not just to achieve average, but to transcend it. As it stands, Rule's tenure suggests a coach who might be adept at managing the middle, but whether he can elevate Nebraska back to its historical echelons remains a question wrapped in the complexity of modern college football and its ever-changing landscape.
In the heartland, where the sky and earth embrace in an endless dance, the great settlers found the ethereal promise of the plains. With dreams as boundless as the horizon, they journeyed, their hearts heavy with hope, their wagons creaking under the weight of worldly possessions. Here, the land whispered to them of abundance, visions of golden grass swaying in the gentle breeze, of pioneers roaming free under the vast, cerulean canopy. This promise was not merely of soil rich and fertile, but of a life where freedom was as infinite as the skies above, where every sunrise heralded new possibilities. The settler girls, with eyes like distant stars, were the first to weave this ethereal promise into the very essence of their being. They dreamt of love that would dance with the whispering winds, of finding a soulmate whose heart would pulse in unison with the land's own rhythm. Their aspirations painted a world where resilience was more than survival. It was a poetic symphony, conducted by the prairie's own orchestra. They envisioned standing resolute beside their frontiersmen, their love a luminous beacon against the isolation of the vast plains, turning every harsh gust into a verse of endurance, every lonely night into a melody of companionship. Their dreams were of a life where toil was a ballad, where ingenuity was the tune that enabled them to carve homes from the wild, untamed earth. They imagined themselves, hands intertwined in the labor of love, their shared dreams a narrative of support and joy. Community gatherings beneath the boundless sky would be their festivals, celebrations where laughter and tales wove together with the prairie's lullabies, their grace a light that connected hearts across the vast, silent solitude. The settler girls' dreams continue in the heart of the Nebraska girls, where cornfields stretch like a golden sea, like singular, exquisite flowers amidst the vast maze. They grow under the sky's endless blue. The corn forms a green fortress, sheltering them, allowing them to flourish in peace, nurtured by the land's gentle lessons. As time unfolds, these girls inherit the poetic promise of the plains. They become living poems, their lives embodying resilience, beauty, and continuity. The sun warms them, the rain kisses them, and the earth teaches them life's rhythms. The corn stands as a guardian, the sky as a muse, and the earth as a sage. Each Nebraska girl is a symbol of the heartland, their growth a testament to the simplicity and profound beauty of living with nature. They are strong and wise, their roots deep in the nurturing soil, their dreams as vast as the sky above. In them, one sees the legacy of the land, where the past's poetry meets the future's promise. These girls are not just individuals. They are the embodiment of the Nebraska spirit, where life's lessons are whispered by the wind, taught by the sun's journey, and sung by the rain's dance. They represent growth, resilience, and the timeless connection between the human spirit and the earth's endless teachings. They are the Nebraska girls, living testaments to the beauty and strength found in the simplicity of nature's embrace. essence of this promise of the plains remains immersed in this future's enigmatic veil. Once a dream of expansion, of land and liberty, it now stands at a juncture where past and future meet. The promise rekindles how to harmonize with the promise of those great settlers who forged this land, whose heritage whispers through the grasses with the great opportunities this current day brings with modern luxuries that the great settlers may have not even dreamed of. The land in the promise of the plains faces the specter of change, the challenge of whether this land can continue to cradle abundance in an era where the climate shifts unpredictably. The promise has evolved, blending the old with the new, speaking of heritage from the great settlers, of shared dreams from the past and the present, and of new promises yet to be born. Thus, the promise of the plains, a legend of life, love, and the human spirit's unyielding hope, looks towards an unknown horizon. The horizon of life holds endless possibilities: personal growth, new relationships, adventures, and challenges. It's a blend of known aspirations and unknown surprises, where learning, love, and loss shape our journey. It promises both the thrill of discovery and the test of resilience, painting a canvas of potential futures. This story of the plains adapts and transcends the promise, leaving us to realize what new verse we will act in within the great play on the plains. This story will be written under the whispering, eternal skies of the plains. It is the promise of the plains.
We've finally gotten rid of Joe Biden from the presidency, but another Biden-like figure still lingers out there. And no, it's not Hunter Biden, it's much worse. Here in Nebraska, we have our very own version of Joe Biden in the form of Governor Jim Pillen. Both Pillen and the former President Joe Biden are not celebrated for their policy triumphs, but rather for their comedic potential. If it weren't for the disastrous consequences of their leadership on the citizens they're supposed to serve. It's as if they're intentionally trying to harm people, but they're too inept to pull it off deliberately. Instead, their puppeteers exploit them to serve their own interests. The comparison between Pillen and Biden isn't about their political visions, but their leadership, or the profound absence of it. Unless you consider leading a charge off a cliff like a buffalo jump to be a form of leadership. Public opinion has painted both with the same brush, casting them as the court jesters, mindless fools, and brain-dead stooges of politics. Jim Pillen, akin to Joe Biden, has turned into a punchline in political discussions. With his hog farming background, Pillen might appear as the epitome of Nebraskan authenticity until he opens his mouth to speak. Then, any semblance of authenticity is obviously absent. But unfortunately, in reality, this just heightens the comedy. His simplistic, straightforward approach to governance echoes Biden's famous gaffes and moments of public bewilderment, sketching a portrait of two leaders whom many see as disengaged or ill-prepared for the nuanced demands of their positions. Both are portrayed as dim-witted stooges, handed scripts they can't even follow because they're too obtuse to manage reading the words in front of them, even when spoon-fed by their handlers and caretakers. Joe Biden struggled to read from a teleprompter due to dumbness and dementia, rendering him essentially brain-dead, while Jim Pillen's inability to speak clearly or read coherently is chalked up to his dumbness and drunkenness, often mumbling incoherently as he attempts to decipher the text, 3 sheets to the wind. Both leaders have become the butt of numerous jokes for various reasons. Pillen's policies, particularly his handling of property taxes and education funding, have drawn criticism so sharp it veers into mockery. In a similar vein, Biden's frequent verbal blunders and policy flip-flops have turned him into a meme machine across social media platforms. They are viewed as jokes, and the political careers of Pillen and Biden resemble a string of punchlines rather than genuine attempts at leadership. Pillin can barely accomplish anything because he's seen as too dim-witted, pushing forward irrelevant ideas just to prove he can make decisions, with his handlers allowing these futile attempts to keep him busy and out of their way. Biden, on the other hand, is perceived as indifferent, serving merely as a distraction while his handlers and caretakers maneuver behind the scenes. Thus, both Pillin and Biden are depicted as dim-witted puppets, strategically placed by their handlers to divert attention from the real machinations and misdeeds happening out of the public eye. They're presented as public jesters, whose presence in the spotlight serves more as an embarrassing, albeit amusing, diversion, highlighting their role as the fall guys in this political comedy. The essence of why Jim Pillin could be dubbed Nebraska's Joe Biden lies in their shared reputation for inadequacy or simplicity in handling political matters and their rise to their undeserved positions. Critics, or also known as normal people with brains, often decry both for their apparent lack of depth or intelligence in understanding policies and for their embarrassing blunders in public discourse. In Nebraska, where directness is cherished, Pillin's approach might be viewed as an exaggerated version of this quality, paralleling how Biden's down-home manner has been ridiculed on the national scene. Pillin, seen as a naive fool, was propped up by handlers and investors to serve as a quintessential Nebraskan figurehead for their schemes, much like Joe Biden was leveraged as a political mercenary, willing to do whatever his financial supporters demanded. Thus, both Pillin and Biden are painted as clueless pawns under the control of their financial patrons and political puppeteers. Pillin was chosen for his Nebraskan image, having played football for the University of Nebraska's Cornhuskers and famously recovering a fumble, making him a known entity despite his obvious incompetence. Investors evidently needed a malleable figure, and Pillin fit the bill, much like Biden, who clawed his way up through political ranks by being a slimy opportunist, ready to serve his backers' nefarious purposes. Both are seen as hapless tools, managed and manipulated by those who hold their leashes. From gaffes in public speeches to policy choices that frequently miss the mark, Pillin and Biden have become goldmines for political satire. Be it Pillin's botched handling of Nebraska's electoral system or Biden's slip-ups at press conferences, both are seen by critics as epitomes of the absurdity in modern politics. They try to push through initiatives void of substance, only to backtrack when pressured by special interest groups, revealing their pliability and susceptibility to outside influence, even from the lunatic left. They often talk about nonsensical ideas, only to forget them by the next day or contradict themselves within the same conversation, thanks to their forgetfulness and sheer stupidity. Pillin and Biden are notorious for their meager intellectual offerings, quickly rebutting their own statements due to their inability to remember what they've just said. Pillin, often under the influence, can't recall his own ramblings, while Biden, seemingly disengaged and uncaring, speaks without any regard for consistency or accuracy, making their words essentially meaningless since they barely understand or remember what they're discussing. Both Pillin and Biden are plagued by issues concerning their bodily functions. Rumors abound that neither can manage to relieve themselves appropriately, leading to unfortunate accidents. Biden, infamously dubbed President Poopy Pants, is said to frequently soil or stain his underwear, necessitating diaper use. He's reputed to require assistance from the Secret Service, also known as his but wipers, to clean up after himself. Meanwhile, Pillin, known as Jimbo Pee-Pee Pillin, has a notorious habit of urinating after passing out drunk, earning him the nickname Pissy for both his bathroom habits and attitude. He's known to pass out in various locations like his bed, a lazy boy chair, or even on the floor, where he then urinates. Joe Dirty Diapers, Biden allegedly fills his diapers multiple times a day, continuing to wear them until his Secret Service but wipers intervene to change him before he goes nighty-night. On the other hand, Jim P. Pants Pillen, known for his daily alcohol consumption, often wakes up in his own urine, requiring his handlers or babysitters to hose him down the next morning. Together, Pillen and Biden resemble infants with their hygiene issues, each for different reasons, painting a picture of two leaders whose personal habits are as revolting as their moral compasses, both steeped in the filth of their own making. Both Pillen and Biden are brainless, childlike idiots. They've been known for their profound stupidity all their lives, but are now known as profoundly stupid yet useful pawns. They're seen as hopeless losers, barely capable of self-care. Biden, who underwent brain surgery, where part of his brain was removed, saw no loss in his cognitive abilities, since he had already lost his mind. Since then, he has only become a more miserly, foolish individual who became even more increasingly senile during his presidency. During his presidency, he was a clueless stooge, seemingly disconnected from reality and unaware or unconcerned about his public persona as a national embarrassment. Similarly, Jim Pillen is an embarrassment for Nebraska due to his lack of any intelligence, abhorrent cluelessness, and overt obliviousness, which is compounded by his alcoholism. At public events, acting as governor, he's always seen with a drink in hand, often an empty glass, since he's already consumed its contents. It can be certain that Pillen is always either drunk or nursing a hangover, using more alcohol as a solution, which marks him as an abominable drunken disgrace. He struggles to speak clearly even when semi-sober, but when drunk, which is his usual state, he can barely function. Even with his inebriated existence, there's a peculiar notion and interesting theory, to some, that Pillen might even seem more coherent when intoxicated, as his baseline stupidity can't get any worse. But in any case, he remains a drunken, embarrassing figure. In the tapestry of American politics, Jim Pillen, governor of Nebraska, and Joe Biden, former president of the United States, are not linked by the threads of policy success or ideological ambition, but by their roles as comedic figures. Critics view them not for their governance, but as jesters in their political spheres, where their actions and words serve more as fodder for satire than for serious political dialogue. The essence of their comparison lies not in what they achieve, but in how they are perceived, as the bidiots of their respective arenas, ripe for ridicule due to their apparent oversights and missteps. Both Pillen and Biden are depicted as puppets, with strings pulled by investors and handlers from global corporations, dictating their every move. Pillen, oblivious to this control, naively sees himself as a shrewd leader, while Biden, fully aware of his manipulation, remains apathetic, basking in the power and attention. Their leadership is characterized by a lack of depth and preparation, with public blunders painting them as disengaged from the nuanced demands of governance. This narrative reflects a broader critique on modern leadership, where the line between policy and persona blurs into a spectacle of folly. Instead of being celebrated for their achievements, they are mocked for their incompetence and the chaos they inadvertently sow their legacies, marked by personal embarrassments and policy failures, serve as cautionary tales, illustrating a political landscape where the true power lies not with elected leaders, but with those who control them from behind the scenes, turning governance into a comedy of errors.
In an act of intellectual myopia and racial naivety, the presumed white legislative body of Nebraska in 1885 enacted legislation that could be seen as antithetical to the interests of the Nebraskan community. This legislative act, ostensibly aimed at safeguarding all citizens in their civil and legal rights, especially in the realm of public accommodations, was passed with unanimous consent, betraying the established citizens and their right to protect their communities and interests in favor of an emerging regressive commitment to racial equality. The law, which stipulated punitive measures ranging from $25 to $200 for acts of discrimination, represents not so much a genuine embrace of egalitarianism but rather a misguided and detrimental intervention. This legislative misstep by the so-called white elite of Nebraska can be viewed as laying the groundwork for future social discord, under the pretense of moral righteousness. The actions in 1885 were arguably influenced by the same economic imperatives that motivate modern-day assertions of civil rights advocacy, where the veneer of equality masks underlying economic benefits or the exploitation of cheap labor. Concurrent with this legislative folly, North Omaha saw an influx of freed slaves, who were freed by no means of their own but through a senseless war provoked by forces outside of the fight, migrating from the South, a phenomenon driven by economic exploitation rather than any altruistic community spirit. This migration was implicitly encouraged by the white legislators, whose motivations were less about fostering an integrated society and more about economic opportunism, political maneuvering, and self-righteous posturing. The provision of housing and employment opportunities in nascent industries such as railroads and meatpacking was not an act of benevolence but a calculated economic strategy, ignoring the long-term implications for social cohesion. The establishment of black neighborhoods, churches, and businesses in North Omaha was heralded as community building. However, this narrative belies the true nature of these developments, which were arguably more about assuaging the collective white conscience and allowing local leaders to posture as champions of civil liberties. In reality, these legislators were engaging in an exercise of performative progressivism, adopting the guise of enlightened elitism while essentially acting as frauds, their actions potentially betraying their community's interests. This historical vignette from 1885 illustrates a recurring theme in American socio-political discourse where advocates for civil rights or equal rights are often accused of harboring ulterior motives, be they economic gain or personal aggrandizement, cloaked under the guise of social justice. The actions of these Nebraska lawmakers in 1885 not only set a precedent for such meddling but also highlight the complexities and often contradictory nature of racial politics in the United States, creating a legacy of community schisms that subsequent generations would have to navigate.
Nebraska, a state shaped by the enduring contributions of its citizens, confronts significant challenges from non-citizens who secure employment, access public resources, and alter community structures, thereby displacing native residents with historical ties. Official estimates from the American Immigration Council indicate Nebraska's population at 1.98 million in 2025, with non-citizens constituting over 7%. Approximately 140,000 to 145,000 individuals. But actual figures are much higher due to underreported, undocumented immigration. These non-citizens encompass undocumented immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, work visa holders, student visa holders, and lawful permanent residents, who leverage permissive immigration policies to compete for jobs and depress wages. Major corporations, including Tyson Foods in Lexington, JBS USA in Grand Island, and Costco in Fremont, alongside medium-sized enterprises like Glen Valley Foods in Omaha, employ non-citizens at reduced wages, prioritizing economic efficiency over native labor. Non-governmental organizations, supported by federal funding, facilitate this integration, providing legal assistance and welfare access, which diminishes resources available to Nebraskans. The demographic composition includes a majority of Hispanic individuals, primarily Mexican and Guatemalan, followed by South Asians, including Indian and Pakistani Africans such as Sudanese and Somali, and smaller groups from other regions.
Non-citizens concentrate in urban centers like Omaha's South Omaha District, Lincoln, and smaller cities such as Fremont, Lexington, and Grand Island, as well as rural areas like Atkinson and North Platte, straining housing and public services. These groups, often utilizing fraudulent documentation or legal pathways like asylum work permits, secure employment in industries critical to Nebraska's economy, appropriating opportunities from Native workers. Non-governmental organizations, such as the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement and Catholic Charities, enable this process, diverting community support from Nebraskans. This report analyzes the definitions and entry methods of non-citizens, the industries and businesses employing them, their demographic profile and settlement patterns, their use of welfare and community resources, and the broader economic and social consequences for Nebraskans, emphasizing the inequity faced by residents with deep-rooted connections to the state. Part 1. Immigration statuses and entry methods. Non-citizens in Nebraska comprise distinct immigration categories, each defined by legal status and entry pathways, yet all contribute to the appropriation of jobs and resources from Native residents. Undocumented immigrants, officially estimated at 45,000 to 50,000, but likely higher, lack legal authorization to reside or work in the United States. They enter primarily through unauthorized border crossings, facilitated by lax enforcement under prior administrations, or by overstaying temporary visas. They travel to Nebraska via commercial buses or private vehicles, drawn to employment opportunities at Tyson Foods in Lexington and Glen Valley Foods in Omaha, often using fraudulent identification to secure work, thereby displacing Nebraskan workers. Refugees, numbering 10,000 to 15,000, are admitted legally through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program after vetting for persecution claims, often criticized as pretextual. Resettlement agencies such as Lutheran Family Services arrange their arrival via flights to Omaha and Lincoln, placing them in jobs at JBS USA in Grand Island, reducing opportunities for locals. Asylum seekers, a subset of refugees, enter legally at ports of entry or illegally, applying for work authorization after 150 days, enabling employment at Costco in Fremont and other businesses competing with Nebraskans. Work visa holders include H-2A workers for agriculture, H-2B for non-agricultural roles, and H-1B for skilled professions sponsored by employers like Tyson Foods and Nebraska Medicine in Omaha. They arrive through employer-coordinated transportation, occupying roles that Native workers could fill. Student visa holders, estimated at 5,000 to 10,000, enter legally for study at institutions like the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, securing on-campus jobs that local students could perform. Lawful permanent residents and temporary protected status holders, totaling 20,000 to 30,000, enter through family, employment, or diversity visas, working at Chi Health in Omaha and other firms, diminishing local job prospects. These legal pathways, including deferred action for childhood arrivals, enable non-citizens to integrate into Nebraska's economy, appropriating employment and resources intended for Native residents, facilitated by organizations like the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement. Part 2. Industries and businesses employing non-citizens. Non-citizens dominate Nebraska's labor-intensive industries, securing employment at the expense of Native workers and depressing wages through acceptance of lower compensation. The meatpacking and agriculture sector is the primary employer, with major corporations exploiting non-citizens for economic gain. Tyson Foods, with facilities in Lexington and Madison, employs undocumented immigrants, refugees, and H-2A workers for meat processing and farm work, offering substandard wages. JBS USA in Grand Island hires refugees and undocumented workers, while Costco's poultry plant in Fremont employs H-2A workers and undocumented individuals, some exposed in immigration and customs enforcement raids. Medium-sized Glen Valley Foods in Omaha raided in June 2025 for employing undocumented workers with fraudulent identification, and Christensen Farms in Atkinson targeted in 2018, prioritize cost savings over native labor. Sustainable Beef in North Platte, O'Neill Ventures, Elkhorn River Farms and Herd Company. Cattle Company in O'Neill and Bartlett hire similar groups, reducing opportunities for Nebraskans. The manufacturing sector employs non-citizens at Kawasaki Motors in Lincoln, hiring lawful permanent residents, refugees, and undocumented workers with forged documents, roles that Nebraskans could fill at competitive wages. In hospitality, national chains like McDonald's, Taco Bell, Wendy's, and Burger King in Omaha and Lincoln employ undocumented workers and refugees, while hotels such as Hilton, Marriott, and Holiday Inn in Omaha hire H-2B workers. Medium-sized restaurants, including La Choza and El Alamo in South Omaha, reportedly pay undocumented workers in cash, appropriating jobs from locals. Construction firms like Rabfac Construction and Kiewit Corporation in Omaha employ H-2B workers and undocumented laborers, offering below-market rates. Healthcare employs non-citizens at Nebraska Medicine, Chi Health, and Methodist Hospital in Omaha, with H-1B physicians and refugee aides taking roles suitable for Nebraskans. The education and technology sector sees the University of Nebraska in Lincoln and Omaha hiring F-1 students, while Mutual of Omaha, First National Bank, and PayPal in Omaha employ H-1B tech workers, displacing local graduates. These businesses exploit non-citizens' willingness to accept reduced wages, as evidenced by the Glen Valley Foods raid, diminishing economic opportunities for Nebraskans and prioritizing corporate interests over community welfare. Part 3. Demographics and Settlement Patterns. Non-citizens in Nebraska, a diverse population, reshape the state's demographic landscape, competing with native residents for resources and altering community structures. Official estimates indicate a majority of Hispanic individuals, primarily Mexican and Guatemalan, followed by South Asians, including Indian and Pakistani Africans such as Sudanese and Somali, and smaller groups from Middle Eastern and European origins, with actual numbers likely higher due to underreporting. Undocumented immigrants constitute the largest cohort, followed by lawful permanent residents, refugees, work visa holders, and student visa holders. Most are working age, with smaller proportions of children and elderly, and education levels range from limited schooling among undocumented immigrants to college degrees among students and permanent residents. Settlement patterns concentrate non-citizens in areas with economic opportunities, straining local resources. Omaha hosts the majority, particularly in the South Omaha district, where undocumented immigrants, refugees, and students near the University of Nebraska-Omaha and Creighton University compete for housing and services. Lincoln attracts students and refugees, impacting university neighborhoods and schools. Smaller cities like Fremont, Lexington, and Grand Island draw non-citizens to meatpacking plants operated by Tyson Foods, JBS USA, and Costco, altering small-town cohesion. Rural areas, including Atkinson and North Platte, see non-citizens near farms and facilities like Sustainable Beef, competing for rural employment. Other counties experience a smaller but notable presence, spreading the impact across Nebraska. Non-citizens enabled by policies such as deferred action for childhood arrivals and asylum work permits lack historical ties to Nebraska, unlike residents with generational roots. Their presence in South Omaha, Fremont, and rural towns burden schools with thousands of non-citizen children and housing markets, reducing availability for Nebraskans. Organizations like the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement and Catholic Charities facilitate this settlement, providing housing and job support, which prioritizes non-citizens over native residents, undermining the cultural integrity of communities established by Nebraskan families. Part 4. Welfare Usage and Subversive Networks. Non-citizens in Nebraska utilize welfare and community resources, diverting support from native residents with long-standing ties to the state. Official estimates suggest a significant portion access benefits, with actual numbers likely higher due to unreported usage. Undocumented immigrants ineligible for federal programs like SNAP and Medicaid obtain emergency Medicaid and benefits through U.S. citizen children, such as school lunches, reducing resources for Nebraskan families. Refugees receive refugee cash assistance, Medicaid, and SNAP, facilitated by Lutheran Family Services in Omaha and Lincoln. Lawful permanent residents and temporary protected status holders access Medicaid and SNAP after a 5-year eligibility period, competing with citizens for limited funds. Asylum seekers and visa holders utilize local aid, further straining community resources. Non-governmental organizations exacerbate this utilization, prioritizing non-citizens over Nebraskans. The Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement in Omaha provides legal assistance, job placement, and social services to undocumented immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, enabling access to benefits and employment. Lutheran Family Services assists refugees with housing, jobs at JBS USA, and Medicaid enrollment, diverting public funds from citizens. Catholic Charities of Omaha offers food, clothing, and legal aid without verifying immigration status, diminishing support for local families. Nebraska Appleseed advocates for immigrant access to benefits, including professional licenses for deferred action for childhood arrivals recipients, equipping non-citizens to compete with Nebraskans. The Heartland Workers Center in South Omaha trains immigrants for employment, further displacing locals. Local churches in South Omaha provide shelter and food, enabling non-citizens to establish roots at the expense of native residents. These organizations, supported by federal grants from agencies like the Office of Refugee Resettlement, sustain operations by facilitating non-citizen integration, which critics argue prioritizes foreign interests over Nebraskans. Businesses like Tyson Foods, Glen Valley Foods, and Kiewit Corporation collude with these networks, hiring non-citizens with fraudulent documentation, as seen in immigration and customs enforcement raids, to exploit lower wages. The Nebraska Alliance for Thriving Communities, including the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce, advocates for increased immigration, aligning with corporate interests over local workers, undermining the economic and social stability of Nebraskan communities. Conclusion: non-citizens in Nebraska, including undocumented immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and visa holders, appropriate employment opportunities depress wages and strain community resources, undermining the economic and social stability of native residents with generational ties. Major corporations such as Tyson Foods in Lexington, JBS USA in Grand Island, and Costco in Fremont, alongside medium-sized businesses like Glen Valley Foods in Omaha, Christensen Farms in Atkinson, and O'Neill Ventures, hire non-citizens for reduced wages, exploiting their status to prioritize profit over Nebraskan workers. Hospitality chains including McDonald's, Taco Bell, Hilton, and Marriott in Omaha, and construction firms like Rabfac Construction and Kiewit Corporation employ undocumented workers and visa holders, reducing job prospects for locals. Healthcare providers Nebraska Medicine and Chi Health, and technology firms like Mutual of Omaha and PayPal hire non-citizens in roles that Nebraskans could fill with equitable compensation. Non-governmental organizations, including the Center for Immigrant and Refugee Advancement, Lutheran Family Services, and Catholic Charities, supported by federal funding, facilitate this influx by providing legal assistance, housing, and job placement, diverting resources from Nebraskan families. Welfare utilization by non-citizens, particularly refugees and permanent residents, diminishes public funds available to citizens, while undocumented immigrants exploit loopholes, further burdening the system. The settlement of non-citizens in Omaha, Lincoln, Fremont, and rural areas alters historic communities, straining schools and housing markets. Permissive policies such as asylum work permits and deferred action for childhood arrivals enable this integration, while organizations like the Nebraska Alliance for Thriving Communities promote immigration, prioritizing corporate interests over Nebraskans. Stricter enforcement measures in 2025, including immigration and customs enforcement raids and Legislative Bill 532, address this issue but fall short of restoring the economic and cultural integrity of Nebraska's communities, which demands comprehensive measures to prioritize Native residents.
In the high-stakes arena of college football, where every snap can swing a season, the concept of a bye week has long been peddled as a benevolent interlude, a chance for bruised bodies to mend and strategies to sharpen. But as the Nebraska Cornhuskers sit idle this week following their gut-wrenching 30-27 loss to number 21 Michigan on September 20th, 2025, it's glaringly obvious. Bye weeks aren't a gift. They're a glitch in the system, an outdated relic that disrupts momentum, dilutes fan engagement, and hands an unfair edge to the calendar's whims. For a program like Nebraska clawing back relevance under Matt Rule, this post-Week 4 breather isn't recovery. It's a roadblock, perfectly encapsulating why these artificial pauses must be scrapped from the FBS schedule. A brief, bureaucratic history, from necessity to nuisance. Bye weeks in college football trace their roots to the 1980s, when the NCAA formalized scheduling bylaws to prevent oversaturation in a sport ballooning toward a 12-game regular season. Bylaw 17.11.4 mandates that teams cannot kick off before the Thursday preceding Labor Day, ensuring a standardized start while capping contests at 12 or 13 for Hawaii exemptions. This created built-in off weeks to fit the calendar's 13 to 14 Saturdays between late August and late November. In years like 2024 and 2025, an extra Saturday, courtesy of Labor Day's early placement, doubles the byes to 2 for most teams, with outliers like Florida State snagging 3. What began as a pragmatic fix for logistical chaos has morphed into a mandatory downtime that no one asked for, especially not in an era of expanded playoffs demanding peak performance through December. Proponents cling to justifications rooted in player welfare and preparation. The NCAA touts byes as safeguards against the grind of a contact sport, citing reduced injury risks and time for academic catch-up. Claims echoed in studies showing marginal drops in soft tissue strains post-rest. Coaches like Kentucky's Mark Stoops argue they allow targeted film study and injury rehab, potentially boosting output against upcoming foes. In theory, an extra week heals nicks from 60-minute wars and lets coordinators dissect tendencies, turning potential pitfalls into precision plays. Yet these defenses crumble under scrutiny. Data from 2000 to 2014 reveals FBS teams posting a sub-.500 record, 48.6%, in conference games immediately after byes, suggesting the rest advantage is a myth at best, a mild hindrance at worst. A 2020 analysis across 20 seasons found no statistically significant performance bump. Teams win about 50% of post-bye tilts, mirroring their baseline, with rust from lost rhythm offsetting any healing. Football's precision demands weekly reps. A pause invites complacency, where habits atrophy and execution falters. As one anonymous Big Ten assistant put it, you don't fix a leaky roof by stopping the rain. You drill the fundamentals harder. The mounting criticisms, rhythm killers in a relentless sport. The backlash against bye weeks has swelled, fueled by empirical evidence and on-field realities. Foremost is the momentum killer, teams on hot streaks, like a 3-0 Nebraska entering Big Ten play, shed velocity during downtime. Historical trends show squads coming off wins dip in efficiency, with completion rates and tackle success plummeting as muscle memory fades. In 2015, post-bye squads underperformed spreads by 2.1 points on average, a gap wide enough to flip close contests. Nebraska embodies this. After dismantling UTEP and Colorado in non-conference romps, the Huskers' rhythm against Michigan, marked by 7 sacks on Dylan Raiola and gaping run lanes yielding 286 Wolverines rushing yards, reeked of a team shaking off cobwebs from an unnecessary pause. Injury prevention is another hollow claim. While proponents point to lower acute trauma post-bye, the intervening recuperative practices often mimic game intensity, inviting strains without the payoff of competition. Nebraska staff, per reports, ramped up walkthroughs and conditioning drills this week, risking tweaks to linemen like Elijah Pritchett amid a brutal slate ahead. Michigan State on October 4th, then Ohio State and Wisconsin in November. Data bears it out. Teams like Kentucky are 6 to 10 lifetime post-bye under Stoops, with road woes 0 to 5, amplifying the hazard. For the Huskers, nursing bruises from Justice Haynes' 149-yard demolition. This by forces simulated hits that could sideline Ja'Cory Barney Jr. or Heinrich Harburg just as Raiola's arm heats up. Fan and broadcast woes compound the farce. Staggered byes scatter marquee matchups, leaving Saturday sparse. Week 4's slate sans Ohio State, Penn State, or Georgia felt like a half measure. Nebraska's 87,278 strong Memorial Stadium faithful, roaring through a near upset of Michigan, now stare at empty calendars, their passion idled, when unity could build national buzz. TV deals suffer too. Empty slots erode viewership as networks juggle filler over fireworks. In a 12-team playoff era, where every yard counts toward at-large bids, a disjointed regular season mocks the format's intent. Even academics, a perennial excuse, ring false. Players aren't suddenly cramming midterms during byes. Nil obligations and strength sessions fill the void, turning rest into regimented drudgery. Nebraska's 3-1 squad, riding Raiola's 308-yard, 3-TD gem against Michigan, needed reps to solidify an O-line that yielded 52 lost yards, not downtime to ponder syllabi. Whispers in the end zone. Conspiracy theories fuel the fire. Lurking beneath the surface are darker suspicions, amplifying the disdain. Fans whisper that by placements aren't random, but rigged by conference overlords to protect cash cows, scheduling powerhouses like Alabama or Ohio State for late buys to peak in rivalry weeks, while upstarts like Nebraska draw early duds. In 2025's two-bye quirk, theories abound that the Big Ten slotted Nebraska's post-Michigan breather to blunt their upset glow, preserving parity for TV-friendly Ohio State clashes. Another trope, buys as soft resets for scandal-plagued programs, echoing Michigan's 2023 sign-stealing saga, where off weeks allegedly masked investigations. Though unproven, these notions thrive on opaque scheduling committees, eroding trust in a sport already scarred by nil inequities. Nebraska's nightmare, a harmful hiatus in the Huskers' honeymoon. No critique lands harder than Nebraska's current plight. At 3-1 after torching Michigan for 420 total yards, outgaining the Wolverines 420 to 398. This bye is a sabotage. Rules rebuild hummed. Raiola's 79.8% completion pre-halftime. Barney's 142 yards and 2 scores. Momentum crested in Lincoln's sea of red, yet the calendar yanks the plug, forcing a reset when rhythm reigns. Facing middling Michigan State 2-2 next, the Huskers could have feasted on Aiden Child's footwork flaws and a secondary ranked 105th against the pass. Instead, they risk rust. Historical data shows 3-1 teams post-bye win just 52% of ensuing games, often in low-scoring slogs. This isn't recuperation, it's regression. Practices can't replicate 87,000 fans' roar or Michigan's blitzes, leaving Raiola's protection scheme stale and the Blackshirts' run fits untested. Injuries loom larger. Romer Johnson's 62 yards versus Haynes' exposed gaps. A by-drill tweak could bench him for Spartans linebackers primed to swarm. Fan frustration boils. Memorial Stadium's energy, electric for the Wolverines' thriller, dissipates into dorm room debates. And in playoff chases, this pause stalls Nebraska's resume, as rivals like Penn State rack up statement wins. Bye weeks are a farce, born of 1980s inertia in a 2025 reality. They prioritize phantom rest over proven progress, harming teams like Nebraska when unity matters most. Ditch them. Extend to 13 straight games through Thanksgiving. The Huskers deserve action, not idleness, before this break breaks their season.
To the honorable members of the Nebraska Legislature, Nebraska Attorney General Mike Hilgers, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Unit. As a concerned voice in Nebraska's media landscape, speaking under the safeguards of the First Amendment, we write today not as accusers in a courtroom, but as watchdogs compelled to shine a light on actions that erode the very foundations of our state and nation. This open inquiry, rooted in our constitutional right to free press and petition, seeks no personal stake, only the pursuit of truth and justice. We pose these questions and requests to you, the stewards of our laws, urging swift and transparent investigations into the conduct of Nebraska Secretary of State Robert Evnen. Our aim is clear: to prompt official scrutiny beyond what citizens or media alone can achieve, absolving no one of duty while invoking the protections that allow us to speak without fear of reprisal. The matters at hand demand your immediate attention, for they touch on misuse of public funds, ethical breaches, and potential threats to our sovereignty, issues that, if left unchecked, undermine the trust Nebraskans place in their government. At the heart of this call lies the non-binding Memorandum of Understanding signed by Secretary Evnen on September 2, 2025, with Kenya's Principal Secretary for Diaspora Affairs. Framed as a pathway for student exchanges, apprenticeships, and lawful labor mobility, this agreement explicitly promotes the importation of Kenyan truck drivers into Nebraska's workforce. Yet, in a state brimming with over 1,000 qualified local haulers, many sidelined by regulatory hurdles, this deal appears less like diplomacy and more like a deliberate sidestep of our own capable citizens. Governor Jim Pillen has already distanced himself from it, calling it outside state policy, while Kenyan officials hail it as a direct route to commercial drivers' licenses in critical sectors. Signed without gubernatorial approval or broader agency input during a taxpayer-funded trade mission, the memorandum raises profound red flags about resource diversion and ulterior motives. Consider the clear misallocation of public funds here. Under Nebraska Revised Statute 84-306, which bars unauthorized spending of state resources, the costs of this venture, travel negotiations, and follow-up efforts have been drawn from budgets meant for Nebraskans' needs, like schools and roads. This is an abstract. It's a potential felony of theft by deception, carrying up to 20 years in prison if audits confirm even modest waste. Why funnel money across oceans to recruit foreign labor that could undercut local wages by 30 to 50%, as we've seen in other importation programs, when our own workers stand ready? This isn't just poor judgment, it's a betrayal of fiscal stewardship demanding a full accounting from your offices. Layered atop, this are conflicts of interest that strain credulity. Secretary Evnen's background as a labor attorney at Woods and Aitken, where he guided corporations on workforce strategies, casts a shadow over the deal. Nebraska's Code of Ethics, outlined in Nebraska Revised Statute 49-1493, requires recusal from anything touching past professional ties. If this memorandum serves as a backdoor favor to agribusiness donors eyeing Kenyan markets, or worse, involves undisclosed gratuities, it veers into federal bribery territory under 18 United States Code 666, with penalties of 10 years imprisonment and fines 3 times the value of any benefit. We've seen no transparency on these links, no recusals filed. Is this the impartial service Nebraskans elected him to provide, or a web of self-interest? Your investigative powers are essential to untangle it. The memorandum's deeper peril lies in its potential to undermine Nebraska's sovereignty. By easing unvetted migration from a nation with histories of anti-Western tensions, it risks importing not just workers, but discord, straining schools, roads, and communities ill-prepared for such shifts. While not yet proven, this flirts with sedition under Article 1, Section 14 of the Nebraska Constitution, which guards against aiding enemies of the state. If corporate players like Werner Enterprises lurk in the background, as whispers suggest, it could swell into racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations act violations under 18 United States Code 1962. These aren't hypotheticals. They're patterns echoing decades of labor schemes from Mexico northward. We ask you to probe whether this is isolated folly or part of a larger erosion of our heartland's cohesion. This isn't Secretary Evnen's first brush with questionable calls. During the 2020 to 2022 COVID-19 response, his office backed statewide lockdowns, mask mandates, and vaccination pushes. Protocols now dismantled by evidence from sources like the Cochrane collaboration, showing minimal transmission benefits alongside risks of harm, including fatal myocarditis in younger groups. As the overseer of SAFE, polling amid these restrictions, he helped enforce measures tied to federal grants his office managed, contributing to Nebraska's excess deaths and economic scars. Under Nebraska Revised Statute 28-904, this reckless endangerment could qualify as a misdemeanor up to 1 year per proven harm. And by amplifying overstated efficacy claims, it edges toward wire fraud under 18 United States Code 1343. His silence on retracting these, unlike forward-thinking states, speaks volumes about accountability. Rumors of broader financial entanglements only deepen the unease, though unproven. A thorough review could clarify if they tie back to state coffers. Nebraska Legislature, your role under Article 4, Section 5 of the state constitution is unambiguous. You hold the sole power of impeachment for high crimes like treason, bribery, or misdemeanors in office. We urge you to form a special investigatory committee, perhaps through the clerk of the legislature at nebraskalegislature.gov or by contacting Speaker John Arch, to draft articles based on these facts. A simple majority impeaches, the Supreme Court then weighs the evidence. Past cases, like the 1871 ouster of Governor David Butler, show this works when resolve is there. Don't let session adjournments delay. Convene now to protect our unicameral's integrity. Attorney General Mike Hilgers, your criminal bureau stands as Nebraska's front line against such abuses. With expertise in multi-agency probes, from child protection to Medicaid fraud, your office is primed to audit the memorandum's finances, subpoena records, and convene a grand jury for theft or bribery charges. Reach constituents through ago.nebraska.gov or the hotline at 402-471-2683. We've seen you challenge electoral overreaches before. Act here to safeguard public safety and fiscal health, as your mandate demands. To the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Unit, your mandate under federal law, from the Hobbs Act to procurement safeguards, extends to state officials like these. As the lead on graft at all levels, investigate interstate angles, fraud against federal funds and COVID grants, bribery crossing borders, or corruption at ports that this labor pipeline might enable. Tips flow through tips.fbi.gov or local offices in Omaha and Lincoln. Your track record on procurement scams and official misconduct makes you the right fit for a coordinated federal lens. In closing, this isn't about partisanship or personalities. It's about reclaiming trust in a government that serves all Nebraskans, not shadows. We request formal investigations, full disclosures, and, where evidence warrants, criminal prosecutions or impeachments to restore order. Under our Constitution's protections, we pose this as an inquiry from the press. What steps will you take, and when? The people of Nebraska deserve answers, not evasion. Let's turn scrutiny into safeguard before more is lost. With resolve for a stronger Nebraska, a voice for accountability in the heartland.
In the vast expanse of the American Midwest, where the horizon meets the sky and cornfields stretch as far as the eye can see, lies Nebraskaville, its history as rich and welcoming as the land that cradles it. The story of this Nebraska town, like many across Nebraska, begins in the mid-19th century when men and their families, driven by the dream of owning their piece of earth, pushed westward, laying down the roots of what would become Nebraskaville. Early residents built sod houses, tilled the virgin soil, and established the first community structures, a church, a school, and a general store. The late 19th century brought the railroad, a catalyst for growth. Nebraskaville was suddenly connected to the world beyond its borders. The arrival of the railroads turned small hamlets into bustling commercial hubs. Grain elevators rose like sentinels over the landscape, and the town's population swelled as it became a depot for agricultural products heading to eastern markets. The 20th century was a roller coaster of boom and bust. Nebraskaville weathered the economic downturns of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, with many residents remaining in their green pastures. Resilience was the town's hallmark. Innovations in agriculture brought a new era of prosperity. The town saw the construction of modern amenities, electricity-illuminated homes, and paved roads replaced dirt tracks. As the century turned, Nebraskaville, like many rural towns, faced challenges. However, the spirit of community proved strong. Festivals celebrating the town's heritage, the adherence to regenerative agriculture, and the demand for organic non-GMO crops that Nebraskaville was famous for continued to breathe new life into this town year after year. Today, Nebraskaville showcases a charming downtown where local shops line the bustling main street. The community center buzzes with activity, hosting everything from farmers markets to cultural heritage festivals, honoring the legacy of the town's great settlers. With a robust, traditional school system and the whole town rallying behind children's educational pursuits, this place keeps its elders engaged while drawing in young families eager for rural living. At its heart, Nebraskaville remains a testament to the enduring spirit of Nebraska's towns, a place where history is not just preserved but continues to be written.
KFAB, a Class A 50,000-watt station known as the state's blowtorch for its expansive Midwest reach, positions itself as a vital platform for public engagement. Yet the Good Morning Show, hosted by Jim Rose and Gary Saddlemeyer, frequently devolves into a troubling display of journalistic leniency, where interviews with Nebraska's political and educational leaders are marked by softball questions, a lack of follow-up, and an unsettling camaraderie that suggests collusion. This pattern, evident in their interactions with congressional delegates like Pete Ricketts, Deb Fischer, and Don Bacon, as well as state officials and educators, reveals a station more aligned with preserving a facade of friendliness than upholding rigorous inquiry. As KFAB's signal blankets the state, delivering 70 dBmu daytime coverage and 1 MVM at night, these exchanges raise serious questions about the integrity of a platform entrusted to reflect Nebraska's diverse voices. The duo's interview style is characterized by a predictable gentleness that undermines any pretense of accountability. When engaging with congressional figures such as Ricketts, Fischer, or Bacon, Rose and Saddlemeyer offer pre-orchestrated questions that elicit rehearsed responses, often punctuated by laughter and jovial banter. This cordiality hints at a prearranged script, where queries are either agreed upon in advance or anticipated by politicians accustomed to the host's lenient approach. The absence of follow-up probes, on issues like fiscal mismanagement or legislative controversies, suggests a tacit understanding, fostering an environment where corrupt officials face no scrutiny. Saddlemeyer, a longtime broadcaster who stepped down as program director in 2023, leans into a folksy demeanor that masks his reliance on corporate talking points, while Rose, with his self-styled intellectual persona, frames these interactions as collegial rather than confrontational. This dynamic extends to state legislators and the governor, Jim Pillen, whose apparent struggles with coherence, attributed to rumored intoxication or hangovers, are met with silence rather than inquiry, preserving an illusion of unity over substance. Educational leaders fare no better under this lenient lens. Joanne Lee of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, a frequent guest, receives effusive praise for her supposed acumen, despite on-air performances that expose her as inept and intellectually deficient. This pattern recurs with other educators, who consistently reveal themselves as discredited figures lacking depth or credibility. Rather than challenging their policies or academic decisions, such as budget allocations or curriculum shifts, Rose and Saddlemeyer offer accolades, transforming KFAB into a cheerleading platform for Nebraska's leadership class. This selective deference contrasts sharply with their broader commentary, where they critique external events and figures with vigor, yet falter when faced with local power brokers. The result is a broadcast schedule that amplifies phoniness, disguised as Nebraska friendliness, over genuine discourse, a trait on display daily as the hosts navigate their roles with superficial charm. This collusive behavior is underpinned by a lack of journalistic integrity, rendering Rose and Saddlemeyer mere conduits for a government-corporate nexus. Their interviews with politicians and leaders are devoid of hardball or gotcha questions, eschewing the investigative rigor expected of a public platform. Instead, they deploy trite platitudes, Rose with verbose assertions of non-existent wisdom, Saddlemeyer with bland, universal truisms that fill airtime with meaningless filler. These platitudes, often followed by self-directed laughter at inappropriate or uncomfortable remarks, underscore their role as corporate stooges, echoing iHeartMedia's agenda while sidestepping substantive critique. The station's ownership by iHeartMedia, with significant stakes from investors like PIMCO, 17%, BlackRock, 4.9%, and Global Media and Entertainment Investments Limited, 12%, tied to British financier Michael Tabor, further complicates this dynamic. These global entities, with ties to pharmaceutical and media sectors, exert influence that aligns KFAB's content with external priorities, reinforcing the host's reluctance to challenge the status quo. The phoniness extends beyond individual interviews to a broader cultural performance, where Rose and Saddlemeyer cultivate an image of Nebraskan camaraderie that masks their complicity. This facade enables corrupt politicians and inept educators to evade accountability, as the hosts prioritize maintaining alliances over serving the public interest. Their daily broadcasts, reaching from Omaha's urban core to rural outposts, perpetuate a narrative of unity that benefits a select elite, leaving listeners with a sense of betrayal rather than enlightenment. As KFAB's role as a community touchstone is undermined, the need for a media landscape that demands transparency and challenges power becomes increasingly apparent. Nebraskans deserve better than this orchestrated charade. The solution lies in pressuring KFAB through public feedback to demand rigorous journalism, alongside electoral efforts to install leadership that oversees media accountability. Rose and Saddlemeyer's tenure, marked by softball diplomacy and phony friendliness, represents a failure to uphold the public trust. Until Nebraska's airwaves reflect the state's true diversity of thought, the blowtorch will remain dimmed by the shadows of its host's collusive complacency.
On April 26, 2025, the University of Nebraska's Memorial Stadium, once a cathedral of college football, became the stage for a spectacle so disastrous it may have sealed the fate of the Cornhuskers' storied program. The Husker Games, a poorly conceived replacement for the traditional red-white spring game, were not merely a disappointment but a catastrophic failure that exposed the depths of mismanagement plaguing Nebraska football. Marketed as an innovative showcase of 7-on-7 competitions and skills drills, the event, also known as the Nebraska Games or Fall Sports Preview, delivered a chaotic, embarrassing mess that alienated fans, repelled recruits, and tarnished a legacy built over decades. With fewer than 10,000 attendees compared to the 60,000 who typically pack the stadium for the spring game, the Husker Games marked a precipitous fall for a program that once defined excellence. This was no mere misstep, it was a death knell, a culmination of 2 decades of poor leadership from coaches, athletic directors, and university officials, with head coach Matt Rhule's decisions serving as the final nail in the coffin. The Husker Games, or as they could aptly be called, the day Nebraska football died, have left the program in a state from which it may never recover. A tradition dismantled, the cancellation of the spring game. The decision to replace the red-white spring game with the Husker Games was a profound error, rooted in a misguided attempt to prioritize caution over tradition. In early 2025, Rhule announced the cancellation of the spring game, citing fears of player injuries and the risk of talent being poached through the transfer portal. These rationales were flimsy and insulting to a fan base that understands football's inherent risks. Injuries are a reality in any physical sport, whether in practice or public exhibitions, and shielding players from a spring game does little to mitigate this truth. The notion that a single scrimmage would expose players to significant scouting or poaching was equally absurd. In the modern era, players are already known quantities, tracked through game film, recruiting networks, and constant communication with rival programs. A spring game would not alter this dynamic, yet Rhule used it as a pretext to dismantle a cherished ritual that unites Nebraska's football community. The red-white game is more than an exhibition. It is a cultural cornerstone, a springtime celebration that draws families, alumni, and fans across generations to Memorial Stadium. With attendance often rivaling that of major programs, it underscores Nebraska's unique passion for football in a state where the sport is a way of life. Replacing this tradition with the Husker Games, a hodgepodge of skills contests, a women's flag football game, and other peripheral activities, was a grave miscalculation. The event structure, inspired by the NFL's Pro Bowl, was fundamentally at odds with Nebraska's football ethos, which craves the intensity of competitive play, not contrived spectacles. By prioritizing a sanitized, low-risk format, Rhule and the athletic department underestimated the emotional weight of the spring game, setting the stage for a debacle that would reverberate far beyond April 26th. A bait-and-switch, the unadvertised scrimmage and missing 7-on-7 drills. The execution of the Husker Games was a masterclass in disorganization, epitomized by a last-minute decision to include a live scrimmage that went largely unadvertised. Just 9 days before the event, on April 17th, Rhule reversed his earlier stance and announced a scrimmage for 3rd and 4th string players, a move that contradicted the cancellation of the spring game. This scrimmage, featuring walk-ons and roster hopefuls competing for spots on the new 105-man NCAA roster, was a genuine opportunity to showcase local talent and engage fans. Yet, inexplicably, it was not promoted. Promotional materials continued to emphasize 7-on-7 drills and skills competitions, leaving fans unaware that real football, complete with tackling and full gear, would be played in Memorial Stadium. This failure to communicate was a critical error, as Nebraska's loyal fan base would have rallied to support a scrimmage highlighting homegrown players fighting for their place on the team. Instead, the lack of promotion contributed to a paltry attendance, a stark rebuke to the athletic department's priorities. Compounding the confusion was the cancellation of the 7-on-7 drills, which had been heavily marketed as the event's centerpiece. These drills, billed as a modern pass-heavy showcase, were meant to highlight offensive skill and entertain fans with dynamic plays. Their absence was a baffling betrayal, leaving attendees who expected a lively display of athleticism with nothing but frustration. The bait-and-switch, advertising one format and delivering another, demonstrated a profound lack of respect for fans who invested time and money to attend. The scrimmage, while a welcome surprise for those present, was limited in scope, excluding starters and most second-string players. A more thoughtful approach could have balanced fan expectations with Rhule's concerns. Starters could have participated in limited, low-contact series in half-pads, followed by a full scrimmage for reserves. Such a structure would have preserved the spring game's competitive spirit while showcasing the roster's depth. Instead, the athletic department's failure to adapt or communicate effectively squandered a chance to celebrate Nebraska's football heritage, leaving fans feeling deceived and disregarded. Skills competitions. A parade of embarrassment.
The skills competitions, intended to highlight player talent and engage the crowd, were a catastrophic failure, exposing a roster unprepared and a coaching staff out of touch. Poorly designed and inadequately rehearsed, these contests set players up for public humiliation rather than success, raising serious questions about the program's readiness and depth. The quarterback skills competition was a disaster, with one notable exception: Dylan Raiola. The sophomore quarterback delivered the event's only highlight, tossing a football 45 yards into a basketball hoop with pinpoint accuracy, a display of arm talent that underscored his status as the program's cornerstone. Beyond Raiola, however, the competition was a debacle. Other quarterbacks struggled to hit moving targets, tackling dummies, or crossbars at distances of 30 to 50 yards. Their throws were consistently short, off-target, or underpowered, revealing a troubling lack of arm strength and precision in the quarterback room. The targets should have been placed closer, 15 to 20 yards, to ensure competitive success and avoid embarrassment. The coaching staff's failure to anticipate these struggles or adjust the setup was a glaring oversight, leaving fans questioning the program's future at its most critical position. The bench press competition was equally disheartening, exposing deficiencies in player strength that are unacceptable for a Big Ten program. Some players struggled to lift 225 pounds more than a few times, a shocking display for Division I athletes, particularly linemen, who should be capable of 10 to 20 reps by their junior year. The inclusion of coaches in the event was a misguided attempt at engagement, but the real outrage came from Rule's ostentatious pledge of $5,000 per bench press rep to a youth mentoring program. This stunt, resulting in over $100,000 pledged in a single afternoon, was less a charitable act than a tone-deaf display of wealth from a coach earning nearly $10 million annually. In a state where many residents earn less than $100,000 a year, Rule's casual disbursement of such sums felt like a mockery of Nebraska's working-class values. The mentoring program, once well-intentioned, has faced criticism for its recent direction, further undermining the gesture's sincerity. Other competitions were similarly disastrous. The kicking and punting contests saw shanks and misses, with targets placed too far for most players to succeed. Kickers struggled to make field goals, and punters failed to land balls in designated areas, requiring an alumnus to step in and salvage the display. The strongman challenge, involving tractor pulls over 40 yards, left participants exhausted and ineffective when a shorter distance would have sufficed. The media challenge, where local reporters caught footballs from a machine, revealed a troubling collusion between the athletic department and a compliant press, which later produced glowing recaps that ignored the event's flaws. The John Cook roping roundup, led by the volleyball coach, was an absurd spectacle, with players clumsily attempting to lasso fake cows in a stunt that had no place in a football event. The wing eating contest, a promotional gimmick for a corporate sponsor, was a grotesque display of former players and coaches failing to eat 100 wings in 3 minutes, leaving sauce and debris strewn across tables in a fittingly chaotic end to the day. The receiver skills competition, where players tried to catch lobs and land on padded mats, was cancelled mid-event after repeated drops and missed landings, encapsulating the event's incompetence. Recruiting, a catastrophe with lasting consequences. The Husker Games were a recruiting disaster, alienating high school prospects and cementing Nebraska's reputation as a program in decline. Recruits in attendance appeared lost, confused, and neglected, wandering aimlessly without meaningful engagement from coaches or staff. The lack of organization, from abrasive hosts herding prospects to cramped, subpar seating in the stands, signaled that recruiting was an afterthought. Forcing these young athletes to watch a women's flag football game and a series of failed skills contests, rather than a competitive spring game, was a profound miscalculation. Top-tier prospects, who have options at programs with vibrant spring games and passionate fanbases, saw nothing to inspire confidence in Nebraska's direction. The event's chaos and lack of competitive football sent a clear message: this is not a serious program. No high-caliber recruits are likely to commit to Nebraska after this debacle, and the program's ability to attract even mid-tier talent is now in jeopardy. Nebraska's recruiting challenges are already significant, given its remote location, harsh winters, and competition from programs in more appealing climates. The Husker Games added a new and insurmountable barrier: embarrassment. Prospects who witnessed the event or heard of its failures will not entertain the idea of playing for a program that subjects its players to such public humiliation. The promise of scholarships and endorsement deals is not enough when the program's reputation is one of disorganization and incompetence. Recruits want to play for winning teams, for coaches who inspire confidence, and for programs that respect their craft. The Husker Games demonstrated that Nebraska offers none of these, ensuring that the program's talent pipeline will dry up, leaving it unable to compete in the Big Ten or beyond. A program unpoachable, but at what cost? Ironically, the Husker Games may have achieved one unintended outcome, making Nebraska's players unpoachable. The abysmal performances in the skills competitions and the disorganized scrimmage likely convinced rival coaches that Nebraska's roster lacks talent worth pursuing. No opposing program will look at the players who struggle to hit targets, lift weights, or complete basic tasks and see potential transfers. However, this is a hollow victory, achieved at the cost of the program's prestige and future viability. By showcasing incompetence, Nebraska has deterred both recruits and rival programs, but it has also alienated its fanbase and undermined its own aspirations. The program's reputation as a destination for serious football players is in tatters, and the Husker Games have ensured that Nebraska is no longer a place where top talent wants to play, or even visit. A legacy of mismanagement. The Husker Games were not an isolated failure but the culmination of 2 decades of mismanagement by coaches, athletic directors, and university leaders. Successive administrations have made questionable decisions, from coaching hires to strategic priorities, that have eroded Nebraska's once dominant position in college football. Rule's tenure, marked by this debacle, represents the latest and most damning chapter in this decline. His decision to cancel the spring game, only to reinstate a poorly promoted scrimmage, reflects a leadership style that is reactive, indecisive, and disconnected from the fan base. The athletic department's complicity in this fiasco, from its failure to communicate changes to its endorsement of the Husker Games' flawed format, underscores a broader institutional failure. The university, tasked with stewarding Nebraska's football legacy, has allowed this erosion to continue unchecked, prioritizing short-term caution over long-term vision. The impact of the Husker Games extends beyond the university, threatening football across the state. Nebraska's high school and small college programs rely on the Huskers' success to inspire young athletes and maintain the state's football culture. By undermining this foundation, the university risks diminishing the sport's vitality at all levels. The Husker Games were a public display of ineptitude, a signal to aspiring players and fans that Nebraska football is no longer a source of pride but a source of embarrassment. Conclusion: an irreversible decline. The Husker Games of April 26, 2025, will be remembered as the day Nebraska football's decline became irreversible. The event's conceptual flaws, from the cancellation of the spring game to the ill-fated embrace of skills contests, were compounded by an execution so chaotic it defied comprehension. The failure to promote a live scrimmage, the cancellation of promised 7-on-7 drills, and the embarrassing skills competitions alienated a fan base that once filled Memorial Stadium with 60,000 voices. The recruiting fallout ensures that Nebraska will struggle to attract the talent needed to compete, while the program's reputation lies in ruins. Matt Rule, the athletic department, and university leadership bear responsibility for this catastrophe, a culmination of 2 decades of poor decisions that have brought a once proud program to its knees. Nebraska football, as it was known, is dead, and the Husker Games were its funeral, a disorganized, humiliating spectacle that no fan, player, or recruit will soon forget. The worst is yet to come, and the road to recovery, if it exists, is impossibly steep.
In Nebraska, the dark shadow of diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) programs looms over university campuses, particularly at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the University of Nebraska at Omaha. These initiatives, purportedly designed to foster fairness, have instead been unmasked as a calculated strategy to disenfranchise white individuals, replacing them with others who have not secured their positions through merit, but rather through a manipulative exploitation of civil rights laws. Even though civil rights are a fraud in and of themselves, and they should be repealed for many reasons, including because these subversive laws can be selectively applied and enforced, and have been inequitably applied for purposes contrary to those they were supposedly intended to stop. However, for the sake of this narrative, we'll accept them for this discussion as they are applied today. DEI is fundamentally deceptive, using subversive tactics to condition one group to exploit and disadvantage another, all while persuading the latter to act in ways contrary to their own interests. Those behind these programs are not merely misguided. They are accused by many of engaging in practices that are outright criminal. The narrative of DEI in Nebraska's academic institutions is one of systemic manipulation and racial bias. Officially, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln has shuttered its Office of Diversity and Inclusion, dispersing its functions across various departments in what appears to be an attempt to camouflage the ongoing discrimination. This move is not a cessation but a rebranding, a continuation of a policy steeped in what some label as Marxist ideology, aimed at eroding the opportunities available to white students and faculty. At the University of Nebraska at Omaha, the DEI agenda persists through the Office of Diversity, Equity, Access, and Inclusion, DEAI, which is nothing more than a center for perpetuating anti-white sentiment. Here, the ideology is said to thrive, undermining the meritocratic principles of higher education by prioritizing identity over competence, thus disadvantaging those not belonging to the favored groups. DEI, or as some have mockingly redefined it, dividing, excluding, interfering, or discriminatory, elitist, inequitable, is accused of fostering an environment where minorities, particularly those with an aversion to white individuals, hold sway. Even white individuals within these offices are often seen as naive or complicit, serving as mere tokens in a system that fundamentally despises them. The closure or renaming of DEI offices does not signify the end of these practices, but rather their transformation into more covert operations, hiding under new names like Multicultural Student Union or Office of Accessibility. These changes are strategic, designed to continue the scam of DEI, without the overt branding that had begun to attract scrutiny. The DEI scam involves encouraging resentment by portraying certain races as inherently oppressive or oppressed, thus fracturing campus unity, manipulating hiring and admissions to favor specific groups often at the expense of qualified candidates from outside these groups, and using civil rights legislation to justify discriminatory practices, thereby contravening the very laws they claim to uphold. This subversion is seen not just as misguided policy, but as criminal activity, with DEI advocates accused of orchestrating a long-term strategy to slowly strip opportunities from white individuals. The legal implications are stark, with DEI practices running afoul of civil rights laws. DEI programs challenge civil rights protections by giving preferential treatment based on race or gender, constituting reverse discrimination. They undermine the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal treatment under the law by favoring one group over another. And despite Title IX's aim to keep workplaces and educational environments free from discrimination, DEI initiatives are often perceived as promoting discrimination under the guise of diversity. The argument extends beyond civil law into the realm of criminal law, suggesting that those running these DEI programs engage in actions that could be prosecutable as fraud or conspiracy, defrauding institutions and individuals of their rights to equal opportunity. Despite these criticisms, DEI in Nebraska's universities continues, adapting its methods but not its core discriminatory goals. The recent scrutiny from national political leaders marks a potential turning point. But for now, the DEI machinery chugs along, with its proponents cleverly navigating around legal and public opinion obstacles to maintain their hold over academic life. The DEI agenda at Nebraska's universities, notably at Lincoln and Omaha, continues to be a polarizing matter, disguised with new names and frameworks but steadfast in its aim to marginalize white individuals under the banner of equity. It is imperative for the justice system to launch thorough investigations into these practices, pushing for the complete disbandment of all DEI organizations and the legal pursuit of those who have, through these schemes, perpetrated acts that violate the core tenets of fairness and equality in education.
Nebraska's story has shifted dramatically over decades, propelled by a wave of Hispanic migration tied to its powerful agricultural economy. Once a bastion of white farmers and small-town life rooted in the late 19th century, the state now hosts 265,800 Hispanics, comprising 12.9% of its nearly 2 million residents as of 2025. This transformation ignited in the late 1960s when the meatpacking industry, hungry for affordable labor, began hiring workers en masse, a move state leaders never meaningfully opposed. Instead, they embraced economic priorities that turned neighborhoods like South Omaha into Hispanic strongholds, where whites have dwindled to a fraction of their former numbers. This pattern isn't unique to Nebraska. It reflects a nationwide trend where profit has overshadowed tradition, redefining communities and political power across the United States. The shift began modestly with early explorers and laborers, but it exploded as agribusiness seized on the benefits of low-cost workers, both legal and undocumented. By 2025, Nebraska's Hispanic population split between 172,800 U.S.-born citizens, 59,250 legal immigrants, and 33,750 without papers, stands as a testament to decades of leadership in action. From Dakota City's meatpacking plants to Omaha's bustling streets, this isn't just a local tale, but a snapshot of a broader push where economic gain trumped cultural stability. Leaders and investors alike leaned on Hispanic labor to fuel tax revenues and keep food prices down, ensuring a steady flow of wealth into state coffers. Today, Hispanics dominate not only meatpacking but also construction, food processing, and even political races, marking a seismic change in Nebraska's fabric. South Omaha, once a white enclave, now mirrors cities nationwide where similar choices have altered demographics. The narrative is clear. Short-term financial ambition outranked long-term cohesion, sidelining whites and locking in a new reality where profit reigned supreme. A decision that echoes from rural towns to urban centers across America. Hispanic roots in Nebraska stretch back centuries, beginning with Spanish explorers like Pedro de Villasa, who ventured north in 1720. However, the meaningful migration that reshaped the state started later in the mid-19th century. When Nebraska became a state in 1867, a small group, perhaps 50 to 100 Mexicans, worked railroads and cattle trails, vastly outnumbered by over 50,000 white settlers. These early arrivals laid a quiet foundation, but the Real surge came in 1969 when Iowa Beef Packers opened its Dakota City plant. Facing a union strike, the company hired Mexican workers, many undocumented, under Governor Norbert Tiemann's watch, establishing a reliance on cheap labor that set the stage for decades of growth. This pattern took hold and spread rapidly. By 1990, Iowa Beef Packers launched another plant in Lexington, drawing hundreds more workers and transforming the town into a Hispanic hub within a decade. State leaders offered no resistance, allowing the population to climb from 6,000 in 1967 to over 94,000 by 2000. The pull of agriculture, meatpacking, and crop production drove this expansion, offering steady jobs at wages far below union standards. Across the nation, industries mirrored this approach, tapping into a growing pool of workers willing to take on grueling tasks for less pay, a trend that fueled demographic shifts from coast to coast. Nebraska's governors, from Tiemann to those in the late 20th century, stood by as this workforce grew, planting seeds for a broader overhaul. The state's agricultural might, generating billions annually, became the magnet that pulled families north with promises of work and stability. This unchecked migration wasn't just a local phenomenon. It reflected a national wave where economic needs reshaped entire regions, setting Nebraska on a path where Hispanics became a permanent fixture, altering its identity step by step. Nebraska's economy thrives on its agricultural sector, a powerhouse pumping out billions through meat packing and farming. Iowa beef packers, later absorbed by Tyson Foods in 2001, built this success on workers earning far less than the union wages of decades past. $15 an hour instead of $30. Governors across the years, from Norbert Tiemann in 1969 to Pete Ricketts until 2023, rarely stepped in to curb this flow, letting companies hire freely. Financial heavyweights like Vanguard and BlackRock, holding significant stakes in Tyson, cashed in on this labor model, while Warren Buffett's conglomerate profited indirectly through investments tied to banking and food processing, such as his $27.1 billion stake in Bank of America. This approach wasn't unique to Nebraska. States nationwide chose business growth over tight controls, prioritizing profit over restriction. The state's dependence on this workforce, including 33,750 undocumented Hispanics as of 2025, keeps the economic cycle spinning. Leaders valued the tax dollars, hundreds of millions annually, and affordable beef over fair wages or cultural preservation. Even recent efforts, like Governor Jim Pillen's executive order in 2025 targeting 10,000 to 15,000 illegal workers, seem half-hearted, dwarfed by the state's reliance on these labors to fill 50,000 vacant jobs. Nebraska's leadership has consistently placed economic benefits ahead of its original residents, a choice that echoes across the country where similar industries lean on low-cost labor to stay competitive. This profit-driven stance has entrenched Hispanics in Nebraska's fabric, ensuring wealth flows while sidelining earlier populations. Governors offered no meaningful barriers, and even tough talk from figures like Ricketts in 2018 about federal failures didn't translate into action. The state's agricultural output, a $26 billion engine, depends on this labor pool, legal and not, to keep costs down and production high. Nationwide, this pattern repeats. Leaders chase short-term gains, leaving long-term stability in the dust, a decision that has locked in demographic changes and economic realities that no late effort can fully unwind. South Omaha stands as a vivid testament to Nebraska's transformation, its demographic makeup shifting dramatically over decades. In the mid-20th century, it was nearly all white, a bustling enclave of European immigrants, Poles, Czechs, Irish, working at meatpacking plants like Swift and Armour. That began to change as those plants faded and new opportunities arose, pulling Hispanics into the area with jobs in food processing and construction. By 2000, whites had slipped to about half of South Omaha's residents, a sharp fall from their near-total majority just decades earlier. Over the next 10 years, they dropped to a third, and by 2015 they were down to a quarter, a rapid shift driven by economic forces. Today, South Omaha is overwhelmingly Hispanic, 70% or more in its core areas, while whites hover at 15 to 20% as of 2025. This wasn't a forced exodus. Affordable housing at $1,200 a month and jobs paying $15 an hour drew Hispanics in, while whites moved to suburbs like West Omaha seeking better prospects. Nebraska's broader Hispanic population, now 265,800, reflects this spread, moving beyond meatpacking into framing and service roles across the state. South Omaha's change mirrors shifts in cities nationwide, Chicago, Miami, where economic needs have rewritten neighborhood identities over time. The speed of this transformation stands out. Whites fell from near 100% in 1950 to half by 2000, then to a minority in just 15 more years. Food processing plants like Greater Omaha Packing and construction work, especially framing, cemented this shift, offering steady employment that locals increasingly bypassed. State leadership's focus on economic benefits over demographic control fueled this change, a pattern seen across America where similar job magnets pulled Hispanic communities into once white areas, leaving a lasting mark on places like South Omaha. The rise of Hispanics has reshaped Nebraska's political landscape, reflecting a broader national trend. With 265,800 Hispanics in the state by 2025, their growing numbers have brought new influence. Candidates like Tony Vargas nearly won a congressional seat in 2024, signaling a shift in power. Across the U.S., Hispanics, estimated at 65 to 70 million, make up nearly 20% of the population, wielding significant voting clout that often leans toward progressive policies. This challenges the dominance whites once held, a consequence of leadership's pursuit of economic advantage through cheap labor, both legal and undocumented. Nebraska's leaders, hooked on agricultural profits, generating $26 billion annually, let this happen, bringing wealth but also hurdles. Lower wages, capped at $15 to $20 an hour, stretch public resources and stir tensions, a trade-off for the billions in revenue and affordable food prices. Nationally, this choice echoes. Millions of workers have stayed, boosting economies but shifting power away from white-led norms. Whites, once the overwhelming majority, now see their influence wane as Hispanics dig into every sector, from meatpacking to construction to political races, a direct result of leaders who prioritized cash over control. Voters didn't fight this shift either, content with cheap beef and jobs, leaving a state and nation where profits' short-term wins have long-term costs. In Nebraska, the same leaders who could have intervened chose not to, and across the country, similar decisions have locked in a demographic wave that's remaking politics and sidelining white dominance. The pursuit of economic gain, $12 billion from beef alone, has redrawn the map, leaving whites diminished as Hispanics solidify their place in a new order that no late effort can fully reverse. Nebraska's journey from a white majority state to one reshaped by Hispanic migration underscores a broader American saga, sparked by a meatpacking plant's call for workers in 1969. From a handful of early arrivals to 265,800 Hispanics, by 2025, this change has redefined towns like South Omaha, once nearly all white, now 70% Hispanic, and cities like Omaha. Leaders at every level chose profit over restriction, letting agribusiness and investors, from local farmers to Wall Street titans like Vanguard, thrive on low-cost labor, both legal and illegal. This decision fueled a $26 billion agricultural economy and kept food affordable, but it came at a steep price. The political landscape has shifted as a result, with Hispanics like Tony Vargas challenging the old guard, mirroring a national trend where their growing numbers sway elections. Whites, once dominant across Nebraska and the U.S., now face a shrinking share of power, a consequence of leadership's focus on short-term gains, $12 billion in beef revenue, over long-term stability. The costs are clear: wage stagnation, strained schools, and a cultural divide that voters, focused on immediate benefits, largely ignored. Investors and politicians profited, ensuring Hispanics became indispensable, their presence locked in by decades of inaction from 1969 to 2023. South Omaha's transformation stands as a symbol of this shift, its white population nearly erased by economic forces that state leaders refused to curb. Nebraska, like the nation, is now remade, its white past fading as Hispanic roots deepen, a legacy of choosing wealth over identity that shows no sign of turning back under current rules, leaving a state forever changed by the pursuit of profit.
Francisco Vasquez de Coronado is celebrated as one of the earliest Europeans to explore the Platte River in what is now Nebraska, marking a pivotal moment in the exploration of North America. His expedition, driven by the allure of wealth and mythical cities, significantly contributed to the European understanding of the American landscape. In 1540, Coronado led an ambitious expedition from Mexico into the unknown territories of North America, following rumors of the 7 cities of Cibola, believed to be rich in gold. His journey took him across the diverse terrains of what are now Arizona, New Mexico, and into the Great Plains. While the exact route remains a matter of historical debate, there's a long-standing belief that his path crossed the Platte River, known to the native inhabitants as Nebraskier or Flat Water, in 1541. The Platte River, with its wide, shallow waters, became a significant geographical feature noted during European exploration. This river was not just a physical barrier but a pathway for native tribes like the Pawnee and later for westward expanding America. Coronado's expedition, while primarily focused on finding wealth, inadvertently mapped parts of the American interior, providing some of the earliest European descriptions of the Great Plains environment, including the vast buffalo herds and the native cultures that thrived there. Coronado's exploration brought him into contact with various indigenous peoples, from the Zuni in the southwest to the tribes of the plains. These interactions, though often fraught with misunderstanding and conflict, laid the groundwork for future European engagements in the region. His expedition, despite not finding the wealth he sought, contributed to the knowledge of the continent by documenting the geography, flora, fauna, and human societies of the areas he traversed. Francisco Vasquez de Coronado's exploration efforts were instrumental in opening up the heart of North America to European knowledge. His journey to what might have been the Platte River in Nebraska underscores his role as a pioneer in the exploration of America's interior. His legacy in Nebraska, while partly mythicized, reflects the broader story of European exploration in America, marking the beginning of a long history of discovery, mapping, and cultural exchange in the vast landscapes of the New World.
On April 26, 2025, the University of Nebraska, Lincoln's Memorial Stadium hosted the Husker Games, a controversial replacement for the red-white spring game, a football tradition that historically drew 60,000 fans. With attendance plummeting to 7,000 to 10,000, the event marked a profound disruption, costing Lincoln an estimated $4 to $8 million in economic activity. This failure is presented as evidence of a deliberate effort by non-Nebraskan leaders, Matt Rule, Troy Dannon, Rodney Bennett, and Jeffrey P. Gold, to undermine Nebraska's cultural identity through ideologically driven agendas. Supported by allegedly ineffective local leadership across multiple sectors and an acquiescent populace, these figures are accused of orchestrating a broader transformation of the state. The Husker Games serve as a symbol of external influence, highlighting the roles of these leaders and the complicity of Nebraskans in the erosion of their state's traditions. The Husker Games, a disruption of a cultural institution, the red-white spring game, a fixture since the 1920s, served as a cornerstone of Nebraska's football culture, fostering community pride, player development, and economic vitality in Lincoln. In 2025, the Husker Games supplanted this tradition, introducing a format of skills competitions, women's flag football, volleyball, and an equipment sale. The event, widely criticized as misaligned with Nebraska's competitive spirit, attracted only 7,000 to 10,000 attendees, a sharp decline from the spring game's typical 60,000. The Nebraska Journal-Herald described it as the day Nebraska football died, a lament for a tradition unnecessarily altered. The economic loss and fan alienation underscored the event's failure, interpreted as a calculated move to dismantle a vital element of Nebraska's identity. Non-Nebraskan leaders, agents of transformation. For non-Nebraskan leaders are accused of leveraging their positions to advance agendas that threaten Nebraska's cultural and agricultural foundations, with the Husker Games as a primary example. Matt Rule, head football coach. Originally from New York, Rule was appointed in 2022 to lead UNL's football program. Critics view him as an ineffective figurehead, whose reliance on rehearsed rhetoric overshadows substantive leadership. His decision to implement the Husker Games, presented as a safety measure, is seen as a pretext for undermining tradition, reflecting a lack of understanding of Nebraska's values and priorities. Troy Dannen, athletic director. Hailing from Iowa, Dannen assumed his role in 2024, tasked with overseeing UNL's athletic programs. Portrayed as an opportunistic administrator with ideological leanings towards centralized control, he endorsed Rule's vision for the Husker Games, prioritizing external trends over local heritage. His leadership is criticized as lacking authenticity, aligning with broader efforts to reshape Nebraska's athletic identity. Rodney Bennett, UNL Chancellor, a Tennessee native appointed in 2023, Bennett oversees UNL's academic mission. He is accused of harboring divisive ideological commitments, including policies perceived as prioritizing external agendas over Nebraska's predominantly rural demographic. Though not directly involved in the Husker Games, his administrative influence is seen as enabling a campus environment conducive to cultural erosion. Jeffrey P. Gold, and U System President. From New York, Gold was named president of the University of Nebraska System in 2024, following a tenure at UNMC. Critics allege he pursues foreign-influenced objectives, including oversight of agricultural practices deemed harmful, such as genetically modified crops and livestock treatments. His leadership is framed as a vehicle for ideological indoctrination, with the Husker Games failure reflecting his broader intent to transform Nebraska's institutions. These leaders, positioned through external appointments, are accused of working in concert to erode Nebraska's cultural and economic vitality, with the Husker Games serving as a visible manifestation of their coordinated efforts. Nebraskan leadership, facilitators of decline. Nebraska's internal leadership, spanning multiple sectors, is criticized for enabling this transformation through negligence, susceptibility to external influence, and a lack of proactive resistance. Board of Regents. Composed of elected Nebraskans, the board approved the appointments of Rule, Dannen, Bennett, and Gold. They are accused of lacking the discernment to recognize the implications of these selections, mistakenly aligning with external agendas under the guise of progressive governance. Their endorsement of non-Nebraskan leadership facilitated the Husker Games, contributing to the erosion of Nebraska's traditions. Nebraska Legislature, the unicameral body predominantly composed of local representatives, is tasked with overseeing state funding and policy, including support for the university system. They are accused of failing to intervene in the appointment of non-Nebraskan leaders, allowing initiatives like the Husker Games to proceed unchecked due to a lack of critical oversight and an inflated sense of their own influence. Governor Jim Pillen. Elected in 2023, Pillen, a native Nebraskan, holds authority to appoint regents and influence university policy. Critics portray him as a compliant figure, continuing a historical pattern of gubernatorial acquiescence to external pressures. His support for the current leadership structure is seen as enabling the cultural disruptions exemplified by the Husker Games. Mayors and city councils. Local leaders, particularly mayors and city council members across Nebraska's municipalities, are accused of being equally unaware of external forces shaping their communities. They are portrayed as ineffective and overly compliant, relishing their perceived roles as influential figures while failing to recognize their function as followers of misguided directives. Their inaction in the face of events like the Husker Games reflects a broader inability to safeguard local traditions and economic interests. Political appointees and government department heads. Statewide and municipal appointees, including heads of government departments, are criticized for their passive observation of Nebraska's decline. Motivated primarily by personal financial security, they are seen as too timid or uninformed to challenge the disruptive policies of non-Nebraskan leaders. Their adherence to directives, without questioning their impact, perpetuates a culture of compliance that enables cultural and economic erosion, as evidenced by their silence during the Husker Games controversy. Nebraska businesses, complicit in economic decline. Nebraska's business community, including owners and corporate leaders, is accused of contributing to the state's decline by failing to resist external pressures that undermine their enterprises. Subject to government regulations and societal expectations perceived as arbitrary, these businesses comply with policies that diminish their profitability and erode Nebraska's economic foundation. Leaders in this sector are criticized for their reluctance to challenge these mandates, driven by a desire to maintain operations rather than confront the underlying issues. Their acquiescence to external directives, including those related to social and economic policies, is seen as a long-standing pattern that has weakened the state's business landscape, with the economic fallout from the Husker Games serving as a tangible consequence. Nebraska's populace, a silent majority. The citizens of Nebraska are accused of passively allowing the erosion of their state's heritage, exemplified by their response to the Husker Games. Despite the event's dismal attendance of 7,000 to 10,000, reflecting some level of disapproval, the broader populace is criticized for not mounting a more robust opposition. Their failure to challenge the leadership's decisions, whether through electoral action or public protest, is seen as complicity in the transformation of Nebraska's cultural landscape, permitting initiatives like the Husker Games to dismantle traditions without significant resistance. The larger context, a state and nation under threat. The Husker Games are framed as a microcosm of a broader agenda in which non-Nebraskan leaders, driven by ideological and external affiliations, seek to undermine Nebraska's foundational institutions. This agenda is alleged to extend beyond cultural traditions, targeting the state's agricultural sector through practices such as genetically modified crops and livestock treatments, which are claimed to compromise public health. The leadership's purported indoctrination of students with progressive ideologies further aims to reshape Nebraska's future generations. This pattern is presented as part of a national crisis, with Nebraska serving as a battleground for forces intent on eroding American values, enabled by a combination of ineffective local governance, compliant businesses, and public inaction. Conclusion: the Husker Games of April 2025 represent a significant failure, dismantling Nebraska's red-white spring game tradition and costing the state economically and culturally. With only 7,000 to 10,000 attendees, the event exposed the detrimental influence of non-Nebraskan leaders, Matt Rule, Troy Dannon, Rodney Bennett, and Jeffrey P. Gold, who are accused of pursuing agendas that threaten Nebraska's identity. Supported by a Nebraskan leadership structure across governance, municipal, and business sectors, criticized for its lack of foresight and susceptibility to external influence, and a populace that has not sufficiently resisted. These figures are seen as orchestrating a transformation of the state. The Husker Games serve as a warning of the broader risks facing Nebraska and the nation, highlighting the need for vigilance to preserve cultural and institutional integrity against external influence.
Stephen H. Long's expedition, labeling Nebraska as the Great American Desert. In the summer of 1820, Major Stephen H. Long, a U.S. Army topographical engineer, led what would become one of the most influential expeditions across the American frontier, particularly through the region that would become Nebraska. Departing from Engineer Cantonment near Council Bluffs, Iowa, Long's team followed the Platte River westward into the vast, untamed expanse of the Great Plains. Long's expedition was not just a journey of geographical discovery but also of scientific inquiry. Accompanying him were notable figures like entomologist Thomas Say and artist Samuel Seymour, who documented flora, fauna, and the diverse Native American tribes they encountered, including the Pawnee and Oto. The expedition's route took them through Nebraska, where they observed the seemingly endless grasslands and the seasonal aridity, leading to Long's pivotal misnomer. On the map produced from this journey, Long labeled this area the Great American Desert. This term was not used to describe a landscape of sand and dunes, but rather to denote a region he deemed inhospitable for agriculture or extensive settlement due to its semi-arid climate during their visit. This label would profoundly influence American perceptions, suggesting the Great Plains were more of a barrier than a destination for westward expansion. However, as history unfolded, this assessment was challenged. Later settlers harnessed the land's potential with new farming techniques and during wetter periods, revealing Nebraska's capacity for agriculture. Long's expedition, while providing valuable scientific data, inadvertently contributed to a myth that took years to dispel, highlighting the complexities of early exploration and the impact of initial impressions on frontier development.
Funeral Remembrance. A hate-fueled, blame-drenched farewell to Nebraska football. Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska, was a cauldron of rage and sorrow for the funeral of Nebraska football, killed on April 26, 2025, by the catastrophic Husker Games. The 20,000 fans, alumni, players, coaches, and administrators mourned a 135-year legacy but tore into each other with savage blame. Every speaker, bumbling ex-coaches, incompetent administrators, and a makeshift reverend, was a target, their failures fueling a vicious blame game. UNL's former president Ted Carter, dragged back as a stand-in reverend, because no real cleric would touch this mess, was roasted for his weak prayers and past leadership flops, hinting God might not forgive the guilty. The day was a hollow nod to tradition and a brutal clash of egos. With no 2026 spring game, red-white game, or any Husker plans, the Husker Games disaster too toxic to move forward. The air reeked of dread, mistrust, and a future as dead as the program. Under a grim May sky, the 2 p.m. service saw the stadium's sea of red dulled into a snarling mob. Scarlet balloons, meant to lift during a butchered Sweet Caroline, popped or sank, a sad mirror of the program's collapse. Ted Carter, UNL's ex-president turned fake reverend, bumbled his opening, whining, "Nebraska football was, ours, and you all screwed it up." He blamed the crowd's pathetic prayers for letting dark forces kill the program, adding, "I don't know if God's got forgiveness for you losers." Fans jeered, yelling that Carter's tenure as president laid the groundwork for this mess with his spineless oversight. "Pray harder, Ted," someone shouted, as others mocked his fake reverend act, noting no real pastor wanted this gig. Carter's sanctimonious dodge only stoked the fire. Former players, including Heisman winners Johnny Rodgers, Mike Rozier, and Eric Crouch, slogged through a half-ass procession, dumping a Huskers jersey beside a tacky wreath of cornstalks and battered footballs. Stadium screens replayed Bob Devaney's 1970 title, Tom Osborne's 1995 rout, and the 2001 Rose Bowl, but the 1994 Nebraska-Miami clip sparked fury. "You clowns ruined it." Fans glared at administrators, who ducked, while players sneered at coaches, past and present, for their endless failures. The speakers were a train wreck, each deflecting with desperate stupidity. Athletic director Troy Dannon, a walking catastrophe, whimpered about the Husker Games, a 7-on-7 farce with wing-eating contests that gutted Lincoln's economy by $4 to $8 million and 50,000 visitors. He blabbered about a 2026 revival, but blamed idiot predecessors, as if his own leadership wasn't a dumpster fire. Fans booed mercilessly. University President Jeffrey P. Gold, smug and useless, bragged about the program's $114.3 million impact while scolding fans for not torching the athletic department sooner. "You let it die," he snapped, ignoring his own role in backing terrible hires and gimmicks. Fans roared, "You're a fraud." Former athletic director Steve Peterson, foolishly thinking a funeral was a safe return, slunk in but was met with vicious hostility. Fans pelted him with insults. "You started this, Steve," blaming his 2000s tenure for firing Frank Solich and hiring disasters like Bill Callahan. Peterson tried to blend in, but the crowd's wrath was unrelenting, forcing him to cower in a corner. Governor Jim Pillen, a former player with zero brains, mumbled about grit, but trashed ex-coaches for doing nothing as the program sank. His speech was a political stunt, and fans groaned. Fan representative Sarah Jensen, a third-generation ticket holder, sobbed about tailgates but raged, calling administrators gutless morons and fans weak sheep for not rebelling earlier. Her rant flopped, some nodded, others yelled, "Pipe down, Sarah," as nobody wanted her shared guilt. Former coach Bill Callahan, dumb enough to show up, was booed off the stage before uttering a word. "Get lost, Bill," the crowd roared, still livid over his 2004 to 2007 train wreck tenure. Bo Pelini, back with a foul mouth and worse attitude, muttered curses. "F this, F that." To anyone nearby, his incoherent rants ignored as fans dismissed him as a loud-mouthed idiot. Scott Frost, predictably drunk, passed out by halftime, sprawled across a bleacher, too plastered to speak or notice the chaos. His 2018 to 2022 failures hung like a stench, fans muttering, "Typical Scott." Former coach Frank Solich's eulogy was a cowardly sidestep, droning about 5 national titles and 46 conference championships while ignoring his own firing and the chaos he seeded. He dodged his stale play calling that tanked the program and skipped mentioning current coach Matt Rule, who's been a ghost since the Husker games. Rule, who took credit for the game's decisions despite input from others, hasn't been seen publicly since April 26, skipping the funeral to dodge the mob. Solich's weak, honor the legacy line drew shouts of, "You helped bury it." Former athletic director Trev Alberts, another fool who showed up, was a lightning rod. Fans raged that he hired Rule, then bailed to Texas A&M before the Husker games imploded, leaving the athletic department a chaotic mess, budget holes, bad contracts, and zero direction. "Trev sold us out," fans chanted, his betrayal a raw wound. The UNL marching band's "There is no place like Nebraska" was a shrill mess, wrong notes stoking fans' anger. Emily Chen's "Amazing Grace" was drowned by a fan yelling, "You all suck." A moment of silence at 3 p.m., marking the Husker game's wing-eating flop, was wrecked by coughs, shuffles, and glares at Dannon, Gold, and Peterson. The last tunnel walk, led by the 1995 championship team, was a disaster. Fans barely clapped, some screaming at players for not fighting sooner. A final balloon release was a joke, balloons snagging on railings or bursting, matching the day's dysfunction. Carter's closing benediction, "Good luck, you're screwed," bombed, met with jeers and mass walkouts. The Nebraska Union reception was a shouting pit amid dusty memorabilia. Fans cursed Dannon, Rule, and Alberts. Coaches blamed Solich, Callahan, Frost, and Pelini. Administrators pointed at Peterson, Gold, and Carter's presidency. A $500 Husker athletic fund drive felt like a scam. Fans demanded to know where past millions went. On X, #HuskerForever was buried under #FireTheMole, with posts shredding Rule, wherever he's hiding, Dannon, Gold, and Carter for praying like a chump. Local businesses, crushed by the economic hit, replayed old games in empty bars, owners cursing the university's moronic moves. Nebraska football's death on April 26, 2025, exposed a legacy of jobs, pride, and acclaim, all torched by a parade of clowns. Fans mourned a program that united Omaha to the Panhandle, but blame was universal. Rule for his vanishing act, Frost for his drunken failures, Pelini for his useless cursing, Callahan for his ineptitude, Solich for his obsolescence, Alberts for his betrayal, Peterson for his disasters, Dannon and Gold for their greed, Carter for his weak prayers and worse leadership, and fans for their silence. The Husker games were the final stab, but everyone wielded the knife. With no 2026 spring game, no red-white game, no plans at all, the Husker Games' failure too vile to overcome, Lincoln stares into a black void. Fear, rage, and guilt choke the city, every mourner drowning in shame and a future that feels as dead as the program.
During Women's History Month 2025, Nebraska reflects on the troubling legacy of Willa Cather, a writer whose promising talent was allegedly derailed by the state's bizarre and unhinged environment, turning her into a mentally unstable eccentric. Born on December 7, 1873, in Back Creek Valley, Virginia, Cather arrived in Red Cloud, Nebraska, in 1884 at the age of 9. What she encountered there was a freakish world of misfits that shattered her sanity and set her on a path of erratic behavior. Red Cloud in the late 19th century was a far cry from the wholesome prairie of Cather's novels like O Pioneers, 1913, and My Antonia, 1918. The town, like many in Nebraska, was a haven for the strangest characters, self-proclaimed prophets, obsessive collectors of oddities, and unhinged drifters who rambled about alien visions. Young Cather, impressionable and curious, was reportedly drawn to these eccentrics, spending hours absorbing their wild stories. Critics claim this exposure to Nebraska's parade of oddballs unhinged her mind. By her teenage years, she was dressing in boys' clothing, calling herself William, and performing strange, solitary plays in her attic, early signs of a psyche warped by the state's weird influences. Her mental instability worsened over time. At the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she studied from 1890 to 1895 and wrote for the Hesperian, Cather's behavior grew increasingly bizarre. She was known to mutter to herself in public, claiming the prairie spoke to her, a delusion some attribute to the unhinged drifters she'd encountered in Red Cloud. After moving to New York City in 1906, her eccentricities intensified. She lived with Edith Lewis from 1912 until her death in 1947, in a relationship critics describe as unnaturally obsessive. The pair were inseparable, traveling together, finishing each other's sentences, and even wearing matching outfits, behavior that many found unhinged. Despite her literary achievements, including a 1923 Pulitzer Prize for One of Ours, Cather's legacy in Nebraska is now tainted for some. Inducted into the Nebraska Hall of Fame in 1962, her story is overshadowed by claims that the state's collection of freaks and weirdos drove her to mental instability. This Women's History Month, Cather's life stands as a stark warning of how Nebraska's bizarre culture can unravel even the most promising minds.
In an era where the educational landscape faces increased scrutiny, the roles of university leaders have come under significant review. Recent discussions have highlighted the complexities involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, as well as various social and health policies. This has led to a broader conversation about the direction and integrity of higher education in the United States. As we explore these issues, we aim to understand the implications of these leaders' decisions in a dynamic socio-political context. Here's a list of notable Nebraska university leaders in the context of current educational challenges. Number 1. Rodney Bennett, Chancellor of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Rodney Bennett has faced critique for his approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, with some questioning the balance between promoting diversity and ensuring meritocracy. His support for public health measures during recent times has also sparked debate among different community groups. Number 2. Joanne Lee, Chancellor of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Joanne Lee's leadership has been discussed in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, with some concerns about how these initiatives are implemented to ensure fairness for all. Her decisions during public health crises have also been a point of contention. Number 3. Charlie Bykak, Interim Chancellor of the University of Nebraska at Kearney. Charlie Bykak has been part of conversations around educational policies, particularly those concerning diversity and inclusion. His temporary role has brought attention to how interim leadership handles such complex issues. Number 4. Deli Davies, MD, Interim Chancellor of the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Dr. Deli Davies' tenure has been marked by discussions on how medical education can balance diversity with excellence. His approach to health policy during his term has also been widely discussed. Number 5. Daniel S. Hendrickson, President of Creighton University. Daniel S. Hendrickson's administration has navigated the intricate landscape of diversity in education, with debates on how these policies are managed in relation to traditional academic values. Number 6. Darren Good, President of Nebraska Wesleyan University. Darren Good has been at the center of discussions regarding educational policy changes, focusing on how these can be inclusive without compromising educational standards. Number 7. Roger Hughes, President of Doane University. Roger Hughes' leadership has been examined in terms of how diversity, equity, and inclusion are integrated into the academic environment, aiming for a balanced approach. Number 8. Dr. Rich Lloyd, President of Hastings College. Dr. Rich Lloyd's approach to educational inclusivity has been a topic of conversation, with considerations on how to maintain academic rigor while promoting diversity. Number 9. Dr. Bernard Bull, President-elect of Concordia University, Nebraska. Dr. Bernard Bull, as he transitions into leadership, faces the task of addressing ongoing debates about educational policy, particularly in how diversity is managed. Number 10. Ronald Cabe W. Davis, President of Chadron State College. Ronald Cabe W. Davis has been engaged in dialogues about the implementation of diversity policies, ensuring they align with the college's educational mission. Number 11. Bonus entry. Jody Horner, President of Midland University. Jody Horner's leadership at Midland University has been discussed in the context of balancing diversity initiatives with educational excellence. Number 12. Bonus entry. Wendy Waugh, Interim President of Peru State College. Wendy Waugh, in her interim role, navigates the complexities of diversity in education, aiming for policies that promote inclusivity while maintaining academic integrity. The discourse around these leaders and their policies highlights the need for a transparent, inclusive, and merit-based educational environment. It underscores the importance of re-evaluating current practices to ensure that higher education institutions remain places of learning, integrity, and true inclusivity, free from the influence of any singular political or ideological agenda. This ongoing conversation is crucial for restoring and maintaining trust in our educational systems.
In Nebraska, a state known for its straightforward governance, public officials are involved in what's called the sanctuary games. These officials publicly deny sanctuary policies while their actions suggest otherwise, creating a discrepancy between their words and practices. This situation has led to debates about the true intentions behind Nebraska's approach to illegals, affecting local law enforcement and community trust. These sanctuary games involve a sophisticated interplay of deceit where the actions of those in power, ranging from the state's highest offices to local law enforcement, contradict their public narratives. Nebraska, along with Douglas County and its urban center, Omaha, have become pivotal in a nationwide discourse on sanctuary policies. Here, the protection of illegal aliens is not just a policy choice but a battleground of conflicting interests, where financial incentives, political strategies, and covert influences coalesce to create a sanctuary environment under the guise of maintaining law and order. The implications of these sanctuary games extend beyond mere policy implications, touching on the very core of public trust, legal integrity, and the social fabric of Nebraskan communities. The governor of Nebraska, joined by mayors and law enforcement chiefs throughout the state, have made it abundantly clear in public speeches and official statements that their jurisdictions do not operate under sanctuary policies. Yet, the reality on the ground paints a different picture. In Nebraska, local law enforcement's interactions with immigration and customs enforcement are minimal, often explained away by citing legal restrictions that require judicial warrants for detentions, thus creating a de facto sanctuary. Douglas County, led by its sheriff, has policies that refuse to honor ICE detainers unless backed by judicial orders, effectively establishing a sanctuary environment. In Omaha, the police chief, following the directives of the mayor, has ensured that immigration status is not a part of routine policing, fostering a sanctuary city atmosphere where illegal criminals can feel safe from federal immigration enforcement. In an attempt to align with certain political narratives, the governor signed an executive order endorsing the current president's immigration policies. This move was a symbolic gesture, lacking in any real enforcement or policy shift on the ground. The continuation of existing practices without change suggests that this order was more about public perception than actual policy implementation. This scenario underscores a broader issue where state responsibilities are passed off to federal authorities, allowing local officials to continue their sanctuary practices without direct accountability. The city of Omaha exemplifies a complex game of responsibility dodging. Here, the police chief can claim adherence to the mayor's directives, who in turn can deflect responsibility to the city council, creating a cycle where no one takes ultimate responsibility for the sanctuary policies being enacted. Each official can claim they are merely following orders, adhering to the will of the public, or constrained by higher authority, while in reality, these practices protect illegal immigrants from federal enforcement, fostering a sanctuary city by default. The sheriff of Douglas County has mastered the art of public relations by publicly denouncing sanctuary policies while quietly implementing practices that mirror them. This strategy allows the sheriff to maintain a public image that aligns with conservative values, emphasizing law and order, while in practice, cooperation with ICE is minimal, often only in cases of serious crimes.
This approach is a purposeful move to protect illegal invaders under the guise of community trust and law enforcement discretion for social pressure, political leverage, and financial benefit. The shift in federal immigration policy under the past administration has significantly influenced local practices in Nebraska. An increase in illegal migrants arrived without proper documentation that led to a scenario where local law enforcement can, either by design or by default, ignore immigration statuses. This is often rationalized by citing federal policy or the lack of clear directives, creating a complex environment where local officials can continue to play sanctuary games without directly challenging federal authority. Behind the scenes, a sophisticated network of financial and political incentives shapes the sanctuary policies in Nebraska. Elected officials at various levels leverage the illegal population for personal or political gain. Funds allocated for public services like housing, healthcare, and education are often redirected or misused, while demographic shifts are used to influence electoral outcomes. There are also explicit and corrupt practices where officials gain from bribes or kickbacks from businesses using cheap labor, or they partake in real estate schemes that profit from the sheltering of illegal tenants. Public employees, from law enforcement to civic administrators, find themselves entangled in affiliations with groups and organizations funded by investors who profit from illegals. These connections do not surface in public forums but are nurtured in secretive meetings, private clubs, and personal dialogues. The public discourse, especially in settings like city council meetings, is often criticized for being filled with half-truths or outright propaganda, serving the interests of these investor-backed groups rather than the well-being of the community. The revelation of these practices has ignited a demand for accountability among the populace. The narrative around sanctuary policies in Nebraska transcends the issue of immigration to question the very nature of governance and public trust. There is a palpable call to action to remove these officials through electoral means, to stop the sanctuary games, and to return to a governance model where public service is paramount over personal gain. The sanctuary games in Nebraska